Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Picture This, because we love this show. We do it monthly, talking about Oscars, every nominee for Best Picture ever here. Picture that, picture this. Chad, are you excited to be picturing something today? Five somethings, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, as always, I'm very excited. This slate, I had to get done like under the wire. On another show that I do, I've been watching a lot of horror movies. I've had some
It's
time
spooky
with
season.
with
Yeah, it
with the
happens.
kid
Mhm.
while the wife is out of town, and I've been struggling to try to get this done. But I
Yeah,
finally got these watched under the wire, and I'm honestly very excited to see how we feel about this slate
that's
because it's something.
it's something, and they're fresh in the brain for you, which is good. Like, it's going to be an interesting perspective because I watched these a few weeks ago, you watched them a few hours ago, and our guest, yep, we have another guest, it's the year classics, we gotta have a guest, has watched them like a month or two ago. So like, I'm very excited. But we gotta bring her in, a first time guest here for Picture This, but a day one watcher. She's been in the comment section, you've seen her on draft day, you've seen her co-hosting some marvelous matches. If Kelsey can't make it, she tags in. And you did see her episode of Frame Wreck on the other show we do, was the highest viewed Frame Wreck episode of all time. So we're bringing her in. Hopefully she'll bring the views to this episode because these movies surely probably won't. But maybe she will. It is Carly. Carly, what's up, Carly? How's it going?
Hi, I'm so excited to be on Picture This. I love the Oscars, and I'm super excited to finally be on and talk about these awards movies.
Yeah, we'll get to that film when we get there, but there's a specific film with a specific actor that you were really excited to talk about. And, before the show, I was asking, like, why'd you choose this slate? And you were like, no, I'm just a huge fan of one of the actors, so much so. And just some other political things about, like, some of the movies and the Hays Code that you were really passionate about to talk about. And it's been really nice to see, like, these guests we've been having on are so great about just, like, watching the movies, but also just really engaging with them. Like, I saw you were logging these starting in like the beginning of August, the end of July. I'm like, wow, she's on it, because Chad and I like to procrastinate these. So it was really, really comforting and warmed my heart, at least, to see every day when like another 1958 movie would pop up, and I'd be like, oh my god, Carl already watched that. Like, that's great. It just shows that the show is branching out and there's enthusiasm. So we appreciate it. But Carly, what is the reasoning? I mean, I'll let you say it. Like, what are the main reasons why like this was the year you wanted to do?
Well, main reason was one of these movies was heavily edited by the Hays Code and heavily influenced by it, and I'm just excited to talk a little bit about that movie, like what changed with it, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about like the movie on its own, and also like what it could have been if it hadn't had that happening to it. So I'm really excited when we get to that one to just talk about
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, it's a cool piece of like cultural history. It's like a cool milestone year in that sense. Even if the movies aren't necessarily as popular. But what are those movies, you may be asking? If you didn't see the thumbnail or you didn't look close enough, I will tell you right now. Those five movies for the year of 1958 for the 1959 Oscars are Auntie Mame, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, The Defiant Ones, Gigi, and Separate Tables, as we all sit in our own separate tables, but ready to conjoin together in the opposite of defiance to talk about these great movies, or maybe not so great movies. We'll find out. Chad, what were your first impressions on this slate? You said it was something. Unless we want to wait till we get to the films to really find out what that something might be. But what are your thoughts on this slate in general?
Well, I mean, now that you guys and Carly are talking about like the research behind like the Hays Code and editing and all that stuff, I'm just interested to see what you guys have to say a lot about these movies because I didn't do a lot of that research, so I'm going to be learning a lot of this firsthand. Like now, when you guys talk about that stuff, all I know is basically a quick Wikipedia lookup and watching the movies themselves. Um, but I'm just not sure, like how these are generally received. And then I don't know if some of my takes are hot or not. And that's where I don't know. So I
Yeah,
just know how I feel about them.
maybe he'll be Chad on a hot take today. We'll see. We'll have to find out. See, I'm like doing all the segues too early. I need to now think of new material when we get there later. Carly, what about you? Like, what were your thoughts just on the slate in general? I believe these were all first watches for you, except for maybe one or two.
Yes.
So what were your thoughts on just the slate in general?
There was no that I hated. I did like them all. I thought they were all good. There was no movie that I was like, that's a masterpiece. I'm going to watch that over and over. But I thought it was a pretty solid slate. I think the movies were good, and I liked the premise of most of them, and I thought they were pretty interesting.
Cool.
So no like strict number 1, no strict number 5.
Yeah, my ranking
sort of
was
like that.
hard. It took me a while to figure out exactly, especially because there's certain things in some of these films that doesn't quite hold up, and there's certain things in one of these films that it's like, how do I rate that when there's so much stuff around it that makes it complicated?
It's definitely going to be a fun ranking, an interesting ranking, if you will. Yeah, it was funny because like Chad asked a few weeks ago, he was like, "So what do you think of the slate, Dylan?" And I wanted to be as hush hush as I could because I wanted to wait for this episode to really like share my thoughts. And I'm almost wondering if I should wait till we like talk about these movies to get a vibe as to what I feel about this slate. But it's really comforting to know that Carly chose this slate because of the interesting discussions that could arise out of them, not because she's like super in love with one of these movies. So I don't necessarily have to feel bad about how I feel about this slate if you could kind of pick up what I'm putting down. But yeah, it's very rare where I will like come into a month where I'm like, yeah, there's not a movie where I'm like, boom, classic, you know, because sometimes there's years where like everything is like mid, and then there's like that one like when we talked about like what was a few months ago, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Chad, it was like that was the one, and like everything else was fine, but like that was the one. Whereas like this one, it's like it's more so like kind of this middle of the pack bunch of films that like some of them I like, some of them I hate, but like they're all very hard to rank because there's not one glaring like masterpiece amongst the bunch, you know.
So I just really quickly wanted to add, I have 3 that I really liked, but I don't know if I love. I'd have to do some rewatches, and then I have 2 that I'm on the fence. But I wouldn't say that I outright dislike or anything. So that's where I'm at. That's where it's kind of like right in the middle.
All right, so I'll be Miss Nancy today. I'll be Miss Negative Nancy. But we'll get there when we get there. We got to talk about the good things first, maybe some bad things, but some history. Chad, why don't you take us into the year 1958? Let us know what's going on in 1958 that we might need to know, either to inform the context of these films or just to give us an idea.
Absolutely. Let me make sure I got the right thing. I absolutely do. The West Indies Federation is formed. The European Economic Community comes into being. The peace symbol, you've seen it, is designed to protest against the atomic weapons research establishment. Dwight D. Eisenhower becomes America's first elected official to appear on color television. U.S. Congress formally creates the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. Riots occur between black people and white people in Notting Hill, London. There's racial stuff, so I included that. China's first television broadcasts start at Beijing Television Station. Jack Kilby invents the first integrated circuit while working at Texas Instruments. The first credit card to be widely offered, called the Bank AmeriCard, is launched in Fresno, California, and was called the Fresno Drop. Guinea declares itself independent from France. The first television show recorded on color videotape, called An Evening with Fred Astaire, is broadcast on NBC. The first pure entertainment computer game, called Tennis for Two, is introduced. Pope John the 23rd succeeds Pope Pius the 12th. Harry Winston donates the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institute. The Jim Henson Company is founded as Muppets Incorporated, and the United States launches the world's first communication satellite, called SCORE. So a lot of firsts.
There you go. Very interesting year there. And always there's great amount of people who are born in 1958, and there are probably some people who died in 1958, Chad. So tell us, let's pay our respects to the dead and say woohoo to those who were born in 1958.
Yep, quite a few births, only a few deaths. Births: Michael Jackson, Madonna, Ellen DeGeneres, Tim Burton, Jamie Lee Curtis, Angela Bassett, Alec Baldwin, Prince, Ice-T, Andrea Swift. I believe that is Taylor's mother.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Gary Oldman, Jennifer Tilly, Mark Cuban, Nikki Sixx, Joan Jett, Kevin Bacon, Alan Jackson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sharon Stone, Giancarlo Esposito,
Ooh.
Viggo Mortensen, Peter Capaldi, Drew Carey, Tommy Lister, Steve Guttenberg, and Chris Columbus.
Wow. The director, right? Not the guy who sailed the ocean blue.
What do you think?
I'll let the audience decide. That's
Deaths.
great.
Deaths,
Any unfortunate deaths? Yeah.
yes, are Harry Warner, Gladys Presley, and
Mm.
Pope Pius XII, as mentioned earlier.
All right. And Chad, some albums. What albums came out in 1958?
Yeah, just a few. Lady in Satin by Billie Holiday, Something Else by Cannonball Adderley, Buddy Holly by Buddy Holly, Bo Diddley by Bo Diddley. I guess they like to do this back then. Milestones by Miles Davis, A Censure pour le Chauffe by Miles
Good job.
Davis. Frank Sinatra Sings for Only the Lonely by Frank Sinatra. Little Richard by Little Richard. Come Fly With Me by Frank Sinatra. And 1 Dozen Berries by Chuck Berry.
Nice. Oh, I love that Frank Sinatra album, Come Fly With Me. Great. And a new segment that Kelsey introduced last month. I'm going to tell you about some of the musicals that were released in 1958. Not a lot of like notable ones. These are stage musicals, so like movie musicals. I'm not counting toward this, but Redhead won Best Musical that year. It was a Bob Fosse, Gwen Verdon kind of tag team musical. Flower Drum Song, a Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical, came out that year. A French musical called Le Plume de ma Tante was that year. Not a ton else. There was a musical called Goldilocks. There was a musical called Whoop Up. Kind of an obscure list of musicals that were up for Tonys that year, as is kind of mirroring what we saw with the films, where these are not necessarily like the most popular films of the time. So there you go. So just wanted to shout that out. That's going to be a new segment that Kelsey introduced, as long as the Tonys were happening. Obviously, when we get like the 20s and 30s, there weren't a lot of musicals coming out, but we're going to try our best to add that. But we also have to get to the movies that came out in 1958, because of course, once those Oscar nominations are read, there are some that do not make the cut. They make the cut in other categories, but they do not get into our Best Picture 5. Carly, as the guest, are there any 1958 films you wanted to bring up just as like notable films of that year that are worth mentioning?
Yeah, Orson Welles, his Touch of Evil. He directed that one. That was one I actually saw recently, and it was really, really good noir. People should definitely check it out. Like,
cool.
I was surprised at how relevant some pieces of it are to today, actually.
Yeah. Nice.
Vertigo. Everyone knows Vertigo, of course. And recently covered on Framerec, Teenage Caveman.
Teenage Caveman, that's right. A year before the other Corman film we covered, which is Bucket of Blood in '59. So big time for Corman. I believe he directed like 8 films in '58. He would be one of those guys who was just like, yeah, let's take the weekend, let's make a movie. I'll make another one next weekend. You know, he was just popping them out like I don't know what analogy I was about to make. Chad, did you have any other notable films to bring up?
Yeah, notable films. I had Bell, Book and Candle, The Blob, the original Blob, Dunkirk, which would be a Chris Nolan film later, The Fly, the original The Fly. Speaking of Roger Corman, Machine Gun Kelly, as Carly mentioned, Touch of Evil. And then for Best Picture worthy, I did throw Vertigo in there. I always like to have at least one.
Yeah, Vertigo is the glaring one where I feel like most people just expected that it got nominated, even for director, which he also didn't get nominated. It's one of those films that I think at the time wasn't really well received, but like with time, people have realized is probably, I mean, you shouldn't say probably because he's made so many masterpieces, but probably his masterpiece, at least technically speaking. And it is, for a point of time, at least for 10 or so years, was the greatest film of all time according to Sight and Sound. So now it's like I think number 2 or 3 behind Citizen Kane and John Dielman. So very iconic film. I also had Attack of the 50-Foot Woman was that year, which was fun. As Chad mentioned, The Blob. One of my favorite musicals, Damn Yankees. Even though I am a Yankees fan, I have to separate myself and my love for the team. Damn Yankees is a great musical, also starring Gwen Verdon, and I think inspired by Bob Fosse's choreography. If he didn't choreograph it, he at least inspired her. And then another great musical, South Pacific. And then a Kurosawa film that actually, I believe, inspired Star Wars, The Hidden Fortress, came out in 1958. So we wouldn't have Star Wars without the films in 1958. So that's pretty unique and interesting. And as Chad mentioned, The Fly, which I will be watching as part of my 31 Days of Halloween next month, the original The Fly. So a lot of cool, interesting films, like a lot of really cool genre films. Vertigo kind of being the big one, though, that people would cite as the snub. But we got to talk about the 5 that made it. And they made it to Oscar night. And not a lot happened in terms of like craziness, like no scandals, no big like wild things that happen at the Oscars like La La Land's or Will Smith's. But there are 3 like notable facts. The first fun fact is, of course, that David Niven becomes the first ever Oscar host to win an Oscar that night while hosting. So he is hosting alongside a bunch of guys: Jerry Lewis, Bob Hope, Laurence Olivier, Mort Saul, and Tony Randall. But he wins Best Actor the same night he's hosting, which is kind of cool. We don't see that nowadays. I believe James Franco was nominated when he hosted a few years ago for, I think he hosted the year at 127 Hours was up for it, but he didn't win that. That would have been the closest example. Jerry Wald, the producer, cut numbers out of the show to make it end on time. It's a very big complaint that Oscars go very long. But he cut so many numbers that they had like 20 minutes to fill at the end. So they're like, wait, we actually finished early. What do we do? So they had everyone, all the nominees come up. Like there were like 90 participating movie stars came up and saying, there's no business like show business, which was probably just an iconic moment that I wish I could find a clip on, because that sounds amazing. And then the biggest like stat that is like the most notable thing about the Oscars is that Gigi sets a record at the time for the most, for the biggest Oscar sweep ever. It won 9 out of the 9 Oscars it was nominated for, which would only be tied later in 1987 by The Last Emperor, which would go 9 for 9, and it would be broken in 2003 when Return of the King wins 11 of 11. So Gigi is the last film until Last Emperor to win every single award that it was nominated for and sweep. And it was also the last Best Picture film until The Last Emperor to win without any acting nominations either. Didn't get a single acting nomination, but still swept. Whereas Last Emperor, I believe, did the same thing. And I think Return of the King also did the same thing. I believe that also did the same thing with no acting nominations, though Fellowship had Ian McKellen nominated, so it's kind of a stretch. But yeah, very notable for a film to sweep without any acting nominations and to get 9 out of 9. It's pretty impressive feat. We'll talk about whether we or not we think that is deserved. As for who was the favorite going into the night, we can only really look at the Golden Globes and BAFTAs. BAFTAs didn't nominate Separate Tables or Auntie Mame. Golden Globe nominated them all. They actually had 3 categories at the time. They had comedy and musical separate. So Auntie Mame won comedy, Gigi won musical, Defiant Ones won drama, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Separate Tables were nominated for drama. And then at BAFTA, they were all nominated except for those 2 that I mentioned. Gigi was nominated a year later, but there really was no favorite going into the night, I guess, because like 3 movies won the Globe. I guess it would have been the Defiant Ones because it won the Globe for drama. But yeah, there was no telling who the favorite was. But considering that it swept 9 for 9, I guess Gigi was the favorite going into it. I guess that's what people were predicting. But we don't have any firsthand record as to what they were predicting. So we can only imagine. We can only, make things up in our heads. But why don't we get into it? Why don't we get into these 5 movies? Very, very excited. Carly, this is your moment of fame. Let's start with Mame. Let's start with Auntie Mame. Chad, tell us about Auntie Mame.
Auntie Mame, directed by Morton DaCosta, written by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, cinematography by Harry Stradling, music by Branislaw Caper, starring Rosalind Russell, Forrest Tucker, Coral Brown, Fred Clark, Roger Smith, Patrick Knowles, Peggy Cash, Joanna Barnes, Pippa Scott, Lee Patrick, and Willard Waterman. Synopsis: a free-spirited woman attempts to teach her nephew her ways as she struggles through the stock market crash of 1929. Based on the 1955 novel Auntie Mame by Patrick Dennis and the 1956 play Mame by Jerome Lawrence and Robert Edwin Lee.
Yeah. So very exciting to start this slate. Carly, you are our guest, so we're gonna throw it over to you first. What are your thoughts on Auntie Mame?
This is an interesting one because it is the longest one of the slate. And I think the first 30 minutes, I thought they flew by for me. I thought it was really engaging and interesting. I really liked Auntie Mame as a character. I thought she was kind of funny and zany, especially for the 1950s, which I wouldn't think of a character like her even existing then, but obviously people did. It's just not the stereotype. But I think as it went on, it did drag on a little bit. And part of that is because it covers such a long period of time that I think it's hard to keep that brisk pace going. I did like it. And I thought the messaging of it was kind of interesting. How it showed these other people that she knew that were incredibly anti-Semitic. And I don't think they're not super clear on how racist they were, but they didn't seem like, you can kind of tell their
Mhm.
opinions were very outdated, but they do frame it as these are bad people that you shouldn't like. So
Right.
I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I did like it overall. I thought it was a good movie. I just think they could have tightened it up a little bit in some areas and kept it more engaging in others.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the anti-Semitism because it's like a lot of these movies that we'll talk about have like outdated things about them, and that's like something that would normally be outdated, but because it's like the main characters like kind of battling against that, it kind of makes it the only progressive one of the slate because it's kind of like saying like no, like we're gonna go against the anti-Semitism. Like this is a character who stands against the bad societal norms of the time, which I think is just very interesting considering we'll see a lot of these other movies where like the main characters are the ones partaking in some dated like kind of sketchy topics where it's like this one's it's like the opposite where Auntie Mame is the one battling against them, which is kind of interesting. It's a very, like you said, different character than we're used to seeing because she is very progressive. She is kind of very free speaking and free willed and has such a open personality that can be off-putting to some. But she really does seem to defy a lot of the stereotypes of the time, which I think is a cool quality that this film has, as you said, in 1958. Chad, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm along the same lines as Carly. Like I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was great. And it was pretty long. But like I don't think that's like necessarily to its detriment. I think it used its time pretty well, but I could see some pacing issues in there. For sure. Like didn't need every single thing that it had, but I kind of liked the story about her trying to pass down her way of life, way of being a free spirit. Although I thought it was I was actually on the conservative guy's side a little bit,
Hmm.
who you're not supposed to like, when she just sent him to like a nude school or something, and I
Mm.
was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe he's right in that she shouldn't be sending a kid she just started to take care of to like a nude school, but maybe that's just me out of touch and people do
Mm.
that. I don't know. But I thought that was kind of strange, but then everything else I thought was pretty great as far as like her trying to, open up someone's mind, and then it just ends up to where she can't do it because she gets, she loses control of the situation, and then she meets someone, and then the kid ends up, going a different way, and then she has to do damage control after that apparently to help save him from like this like rich family, like you guys are talking about, the anti-Semite people. And But ultimately I thought a lot of it was really funny, and I think that's really what made it worthwhile to enjoy the whole time. Especially the lady Gooch. I thought she was really funny in particular. And
That's like the assistant who's like got the
yeah,
glasses and stuff. And she's trying to like get her to spice it up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
She's
because
fun.
she's trying to write her memoir because Patrick is like, you're really interesting, you should write a memoir. And then people are like trying to take advantage of her, and then you see she ends up trying to thwart the guy's plans by sending Gooch to like date him, and she lies and says that Gooch is like someone of import. And then you see like Gooch come back later, and she's like, I think she's drunk, she's like apparently pregnant now, and it's just, I don't know, it's like a whole thing like you don't really
Yeah.
see, I think. But like it seems like it was like a crazy night. And then I like the big dinner scene, where she has to basically thwart Patrick's bride so he doesn't go down that path or something like that.
Hmm.
It's very strange, like just like Auntie Mame fighting conservative values and
Hmm.
and stuff, and then ending with her saying, well, now I get to try all over again with Patrick's son Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it almost feels like kind of the Mary Poppins syndrome of like it's not really her doing a lot of the changing in personal growth for herself. It's more so everyone else kind of being, their lives are influenced by her, but she's still the main character because she has this like iconic infectious energy. Yeah, it's really funny because I went in this slate being like, like I'm probably gonna be like the downer of the three, but like I think this is the one where I am higher on it than you two, because I actually
Mm.
found this very enjoyable. I thought, Rosalind Russell has just such a just energy and vivaciousness to her that like every time she comes in the screen, it just jolts you awake, to where like I didn't really feel the pacing issues, because first off, I like how it's episodic, so it did feel like kind of like I'm flipping through a book and like this is the next chapter. It didn't feel like it was staying in one place for too long, which I kind of like, because Mame just feels like that kind of character. She's like, oh, but now on to the next thing, on to the next, like she's always moving, always buzzing, always going. So she's trying to do this thing. Yeah, I can ride horses, like it's this adventure and then it's this adventure, and she's working as a shop clerk, and it does feel a little bit manic at times, like you said, Chad. It's like she leaves and then she comes back and she's pregnant. Like it does feel like it has that kind of like 50s style like comedy play kind of quality, where like door opens, character says something, oh no, closes door, another door opens across the stage, and then another character runs in. Where's that character? And it's like they're kind of circling each other. It has that like kind of noises off manic energy to it. But I do think, this character is so lively and so infectiously fun that like I enjoy watching it, because I enjoy watching her. And I do think if you strip it away and put a less interesting character in there, or maybe a different actress in that character role, I don't know if it's as successful, but I do think it like kind of rides on her. It's like the whole, did your back hurt from like carrying the film on your shoulders type deal, but it's like, the movie is Auntie Mame, so like that's what you expect, and I think it delivers. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it does feel the lightest. It doesn't feel like all these movies at the end, there's something that either like sits with me in a dramatic way or sits with me in like an uncomfortable way. But this one, it ends and I'm like, that was a good time. Like I don't have this much passion for it, but I do think it's a good time. And I feel content with my experience that I went on and my journey I went on, because as Carly said, it is much more sprawling than I think any of us assumed it would be, because it kind of starts at stationary for like 20 minutes, as Carly said. It's like, it's going to be the sweet tale with her and her son, and it's like, nope, it goes in a million different directions, and then she's in this place and she's in this place, but I kind of like that. It makes it feel like, it makes the time pass faster, at least for me, even though I do see what you guys mean. Like it does. It is long, but I did think the energy and the pacing matched with what the story was trying to do. But
Yeah, I think that's true. That it is definitely enjoyable, especially like when you get to like the end when she's got all of like the couches on like pulley systems. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in the movie that's just kind of fun. But I did want to say, like, sometimes when I'm like not fully engaged with the story, I try to think about like how would the story be different that I would be really engaged with it. And I thought that I wanted to see more of like the relationship building between her and Patrick.
Mhm.
That's precisely like what the movie removes. Like they tear them apart, and then she only gets to see him like much later. And I don't know. I guess I wanted to see more of that story. Like I thought that's what it was going to be, and then it was a little bit different. So, but I don't even know if that's a better movie. So that's a question.
Well, and it's very funny. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Carly.
I think part of the reason I like the first 30-ish minutes is because it focuses so much on that relationship. And that was something I was really curious to see. And it was just kind of jarring how quickly she gets over losing this almost like son-like figure that she was starting to like.
Right.
And then she's just like moving on to the next thing. And I think in the end that works more for the movie, but on a first watch, it's a little jarring being like, wait, is he gonna come back, or is she just just moved on? Yeah.
And then she sees him later and she's just like, oh wait, you're an asshole now, damn it.
Yeah. It's funny that Chad mentioned like what another version of this could be, because it is very interesting. I went into this thinking this was the musical, because there is a musical called Mame, and I was like, oh, and then I see Comden and Green literally wrote the screenplay for this, and they're like musical composers. They did On the Town, they did the Peter Pan musical, they did Wilderness, like all these plays and musicals that I'm like, oh, it's Comden and Green, it's gonna be this great musical. And I've heard so much about Mame, like I know the song, okay, great, let's watch it. And I'm like, this isn't a musical. And it's very interesting because the musical came out, I believe, in 1974. So it was a little later, but on Broadway it was 1966. But it was all based on the same, like, I guess it's the same book, or it's a play. Yeah, so there was a play in 56, the novel in 55, this came out in 58, and then the musical came a decade later. But it does all kind of have that same energy, to where it almost felt like a musical just without the songs, because it was very long, very sprawling, kind of episodic. There were different characters coming and going, but it was all still focused on the main character, to where it almost felt like it totally welcomed like a few musical numbers here and there, so we can have those moments of connection where it's like, now she's going to sing a song with her son, now she's going to sing a song with this new love, now she's going to sing a song with the other wife who knows how to horse ride, now she's going to sing a song with the assistant that she's trying to spruce up, and it's like a fun comedic number, like I Feel Pretty, and then she's going to sing a song with the family and kind of stick it to them, and it's her big ballad. Like I feel like this almost feels like a musical without the music. And maybe it's because of the technicolor of it all, because of the way it looks, because it looks gorgeous. It looks like kind of that big grand musical. There's even that sequence where she is in a play. It's like the funny girl moment where she's like, I'm gonna take the stage now, and it's embarrassing, secondhand embarrassment, but it's still very fun. But I do like how you brought that up, Chad, like, oh, how to fix this thing, because I do think they almost did fix it a decade later, and they're like, let's turn this into a musical. Or like,
Yeah.
it's not based on this movie, it's based on the play, but like both of these come from the play. It's very faithful, but it's like we did get a musical version of it a decade later. I'm almost wondering if that is the ideal version of this particular story, to where I feel like that might have been what was missing here. That might be the key that makes it a little less impactful than it could have been.
Was the musical, was that the one with Lucille Ball?
I believe so. Let me look it up. Yeah, musical fame. Mame, sorry. Yeah, Lucille Ball. She played it, and B. Arthur was one of the side characters, and I believe B. Arthur played Vera. So yeah, like it's a musical. It came out literally a decade later on Broadway, and then in 1974 the film came out. But yeah, I find it very funny because it's like I went into this thinking it was a musical, so when it starts, I'm like, oh, it feels like a musical. Like everyone's got this big energy and it's colorful, and then it never got to a song, and I'm like, oh, this is not a musical. And I looked up, I was like, oh, I'm thinking of the musical. But I just thought it was very funny. It was a funny coincidence, and it almost kind of put me in the right mindset, I think, because I went into it thinking it would be this kind of like silly musical, to where I honestly think that helped me enjoy it a little bit more, because at least like in the pacing of it, I was like, okay, yeah, no, this is where we'd be getting into our like the end of second act, the 11 o'clock number. So I just think that's very interesting, and I'm excited to now watch the musical to see how it compares, because I don't know how different it is. I've never seen it. I've only listened to it, so it's very interesting. Just a very interesting tidbit.
Yeah, I think a lot of these movies have quite a few like really comedic bits that I really enjoyed. And I also really enjoyed the ending of this one. Auntie Mame is basically saying, "Oh, I bought that house and I turned it into like an orphanage for Jewish children or something like that." And the people like across the road were like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, yeah.
It's like score.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, what else is there to talk about? I mean, it's hard because like some of these movies, it's like, no, it was good, it was enjoyable, but like that's kind of where it ends. Like this one's not as deep and as profound as some of the other films will go. But
Yeah.
were you guys fans of Rosalind Russell? Because I was worried that it might be a little too much at times, to where like some people could be off put. But
Yeah, I
Yeah,
thought she was good. I liked those big performances, and yeah, she definitely was Auntie Mame. So I liked her.
especially when she's like, "Darling."
yes, yeah,
Oh,
she
and
has
like
just such an iconic way of
and
speaking. Yeah.
yeah, and like everybody being like, "You're a top drawer," and I want to start calling people top drawer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's just such a confidence. Like it's really interesting to see a film where when it starts, the character knows 100% who she is. There's no like come. It's the opposite of coming of age. She is come of age. She knows who she is, and I think there's something to be said about that. There's like a really cool energy that comes with that. So, yeah, pretty enjoyable. Is that for Auntie Mame? Just like sweet, short, little sweet conversation. Cool, no problem at all. Auntie Mame nominated for 6 Oscars, wins 0 of them, unfortunately. Gigi swept, so you're going to see a lot of 0 for 6s or 0 for 7s. Auntie Mame nominated for Best Picture, nominated for Best Actress for Rosalind Russell, nominated for Supporting Actress for Peggy Cass, nominated for Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Color, and Best Film Editing. Auntie Mame, what a cool cat she was. I did talk about a musical, did kind of parallel, but now let's talk about a play. Let's talk about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Chad, tell us about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Sure. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Directed by Richard Brooks. Written by Richard Brooks and James Poe. Cinematography by William Daniels. Music by Charles Wolcott. Starring Elizabeth Taylor, Paul Newman, Burl Ives, Jack Carson, Judith Anderson, Madeline Sherwood, Larry Gates, and Vaughn Taylor. Synopsis: an alcoholic visits his dying father with his childless wife. Based on the 1955 play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams, and also depicted right behind Dylan.
Yes. So I have the play right here, from the Drama Bookshop in 2001. My mother probably bought this then. Yeah, it's a great play. And if you've never read Tennessee Williams, I believe this is the first Tennessee Williams thing that Chad and I are covering. I know we're gonna cover Streetcar Named Desire at some point. But Tennessee Williams, one of the greatest writers to ever live, one of my favorite playwrights. And I was very excited going into this because I've read the play a bunch of times, never seen it, seen the film, never seen it on stage, but I've watched like different versions of it online. And it's very interesting because, this is a play that was so revolutionary because it tackled homosexuality in a very overt way. And I'm watching the film and I'm like, interesting, they haven't brought it up yet. And then I'm watching the film and I'm like, interesting, they haven't brought it up yet. And I'm watching the film and I'm like, huh, interesting, they haven't brought it up yet. I'm like, oh, it's credits and they haven't brought it up yet. And I do think it's one of those things where I have no real way to engage with this film properly because I read the play first. And it's very difficult for me because it's like there's this big glaring omission for me that is like, it's almost one of those things where it doesn't feel right without it. But I am interested to hear from your two perspectives as two people who haven't like read the play or seen the play, how you guys felt about it. Because I think a lot of my criticisms that we'll get into, obviously we've kind of hinted at the Hays Code of it all, but I'm really interested to see what you guys thought of it because you guys are fresh faces to the story and to this dynamic. So I want to like just talk about the film first before I dive into like the film versus the play, because I feel like a lot of my own criticism of this is wholly skewed by that, which like we talk about a lot on the show. It's like your own perspective, your own career, your own beliefs, what you've read. Like a lot of people don't like certain book adaptations because they've read the book first. We had Carrie on to talk about The Verdict. She's a lawyer, so she has a certain perspective on that. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So I'm very interested to hear how you two felt about this before I get into like all the things that this doesn't include, because it was just hard for me to engage with it when there's so much that is not in it as an adaptation. And then that's the fault we get at sometimes with adaptations, is if it's not faithful, it's like you got to be able to separate it. So I would love to hear from you guys first. Chad, we'll start with you since it's very fresh on the brain. I believe this is the most recent one you watched of the 5. What do you think of this one, Chad?
I like this one.
Okay, cool.
And I don't okay, sorry, the baby monitor keeps beeping. I don't know like what the differences are.
Okay.
I don't know who's supposed to be gay in this movie or in the play. So I'm very interested to find that out because yeah, that's not like, I don't even think that's hinted at in the movie that we got.
Right.
But I don't even know if that's a more interesting layer to the movie or not. Because I enjoyed what it was, basically just the couple coming back to Mississippi because the father's dying, and then he doesn't think he's dying, but then he has to like be brutally confronted that he's dying, and then he has to like reconcile with his son who's gone down a bad path, and his wife has also gone down a bad path. Their relationship is rocky. And then you have the other couple, his other son, who they seemingly like have like everything in life, I guess, like their kids, but they're like money grubbing people, and that's all they care about is the money. And then he's the father's big daddy is confronted with his materialism and all that stuff. And then the wife of Big Daddy, Big Mama, is confronted with her fear of losing her husband. And I liked all of this stuff like coming together. And they say there was the one quote that it was like you see the best and the worst in people when you're confronted with like tragedy. And I think we got a lot of that. There's a lot of great quotes I liked in this. I also at one point was like, is this basically Awkwafina's The Farewell? When I was watching it, I was like, this kind of feels like that. But also this kind of reminded me a lot about our coming up election, because with Big Daddy, before he started to change, I was like, he's basically kind of like this person that doesn't seem like he cares about anyone, and all he cares about is his money and power. And I'm like, hey, there's someone trying to get elected that is kind of like that. And then I was like, wait, Elizabeth Taylor is a childless lady who goes by Cat, like she's the cat lady, childless cat lady. I'm like, wait, did they know about this election back in 1958? Like,
that'd be crazy.
Is this JD Vance's like favorite movie or something, or that he hates? I don't know. I
knew this conversation was getting political. I did not think this was the way it would. No, but that's an interesting conversation. There are no cats though. No cats on hot tin roofs in this movie.
Except
Very
for
misleading.
Elizabeth Taylor, if you
She
shoot
is
the
the cat.
cat.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. It's a metaphor. She is cat. She is mother. Yeah. Very interesting perspective. For sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
and I did at one point, I never got it, but I was wondering if Big Daddy was just gonna start singing "Have a Holly Jolly Christmas," and he never did.
Yeah, Big Daddy. They say it so many times. It's like one of those things where, regardless of if I had seen this or not, like I do not recall them saying his name so many times. It's just funny to hear over and over and over. Big Daddy, Big Daddy. I don't know. It's one of those
Big
things I noticed. I was like, it's almost like that itch where you're scratching it and you don't really mind it, and then you're like, wow, I've like picked this open, and I'm like, I'm still itching at it. It's like
and
you
then
just keep saying it and saying it.
and then it like plays into the movie when he's talking to Paul Newman. He's like, "You don't call me Big Daddy."
Yeah, exactly. He's the one who doesn't. Yeah, Paul Newman, a very depressing Paul Newman performance. Not that it's bad that it makes me depressed, but like very kind of
Yeah.
subdued Paul Newman, which we've seen like versions of like The Verdict, but like you see it in comparison to like The Sting and The Hustler. It's like because we covered our fair share of Paul Newman on the show, and this is one of his most subdued. And then we just covered an Elizabeth Taylor film 2 months ago, so it's very interesting to see another performance of hers, very recent, in comparison to Virginia Woolf too, because it is just a different energy. Because this is kind of about the basking and the hotness and the heat and like the tension and the kind of stickiness in the air, that kind of feeling, it's a cat on a hot tin roof. There's got to be like this pressure cooker like feel to it, which we'll talk about if it has that or not. But I do think the performances at least try to go for something a lot more like drab and slow and more depressing, not as lively as we're used to from these actors. But it's an interesting perspective. Carly, what were your thoughts on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? Because I know you've watched this a few times, right?
Yes, this is my second time watching it. The first time I watched it, I can't remember why I knew it was queer or gay or that there was some part of that. Because when I went into it, I was like, I finished the movie. I was like, okay, that wasn't gay though. Did I miss something?
Right.
And I kind of just didn't think about it and moved on. And then I was thinking about it again, I think somewhat recently. And then I was like, okay, let me, and I think that was right around the time when I was pitched this as the classics year I could be on. And this time I like did research and then watched the movie just so I could be prepared and know a little bit more about why it's considered queer and that type of thing. And it is very, very subtle. The stuff between Brick and Skipper, like it's very subtle.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's the queer thing that like whenever his wife mentions Skipper in the movie, he kind of like snaps at her, and it's just like it feels like it's very personal. He doesn't want to talk about it.
And the movie frames it as what? That like she killed him somehow, like, and that's why he hates her.
I think no. I think I'm pretty sure the movie frames it as that he did kill himself.
That he killed himself, but she's somewhat to blame for that.
Yeah,
right?
but she might somewhat be to blame for it. That was at least my interpretation.
That's as vague as they keep it, though. Yeah, they don't share specifics as to why he's so torn up about Skipper in particular.
Yeah, they don't show the specifics of that. And before we get into comparing it to what the play was, I did really like this movie. I thought, like, if you can separate it from the play and you can separate the Hays Code of it all, I did think it was really effective. Like, I thought it was really effective, messy family drama type thing. Like, I like how they're, I think it's Brick's, is it Brick's brother or Brick's sister? I always forget. But like how they're kind of money grubbing and like they're not really good people. And then like how Elizabeth Taylor's character, how you can tell she wants to connect to her husband, and like he's just like shutting her out. Like there's nothing she can do to connect to him. And then there's Big Daddy overseeing it all, and like it's just I love all the different complicated dynamics going on. Yeah. I think like again, separate it from the play. And that's what I tried to do with my rankings. I tried to just think based on the movie, not based on the icky Hays Code stuff, not based on the homophobia, based on the movie, how much should I like it? And I liked this a lot. I thought it was a very strong film, really great performances. And well, outside of the gross Confederate flags, but that's just kind of what you get in 1958. But yeah, I thought it was a really good film. It's not one I would mind revisiting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's very well made, and obviously their acting they have is phenomenal. I mean, you're Paul Newman, Elizabeth
Dude.
Taylor, Burl Ives, like that alone, those three, it's like, you can't really go wrong with it, but it's a lot about also what the material is. And so we could talk about the Hays Code, just what it is for people listening who might not know. It's like this code that was set from, I believe, like the late 40s or mid 40s to like the early 70s, I want to say, or late 60s maybe. That was just kind of like this period, like golden age Hollywood, where it was basically censorship, censoring nudity and profanity and violence, but also queerness. And I think that was like a big thing that even at the time, even if the Hays Code wasn't really a thing, it was still something that was very much played down regardless. But I do think, this is the 50s. We're getting to the 60s, where just counterculture and just the freedom and the hippie movement, all that, like free and peace and love, and that's becoming a thing that's really on the rise. So for this play to come out, and I don't exactly know the date that this play did come out, 1955. Okay, so it's like 3 years before this. So this is like in the heat of that moment when things are on the rise, and the 50s being like this big kind of sexual reawakening for just community in general, and the society in general, just this idea of freedom of expression and love, and queerness being that thing. But I do think, reading the play, it is very clear that he is torn up about his love dying. And it's very overt in the play. It's mentioned, by word, he's a homosexual, loved this guy, Skipper, and that's why there is no connect between him and his wife. And it makes so much more sense when you have that backstory of like why he's aching so much, why he is so depressed. Because if you don't have that context, it just feels like this guy's just a mopey, glum Eeyore type that's just always depressed, and he just can't connect with his wife. And so then by the end, when they finally do reconcile, it's in the play, it's a lot more heartbreaking, because it's like that is him basically coming to terms with the fact that he can't live freely as he wants to, and him kind of succumbing to it, and giving up. But here it's just kind of like, no, the cure for it, just sleep with a woman, you'll forget all about it. But it's also like a little weirder too, because they don't ever state the homosexuality in it. So it's very difficult, I think, to really capture the intensity of that relationship as properly as they could have without that information, I think. And just knowing that information, to not see it on the screen, it's a little harder to kind of buy into their tension. I think the stuff with him and his father is totally fine. Like that stuff stands fine as is. But I think the central relationship that the film is trying to show us is Newman and Taylor. And I do think it's weakened when you don't have that extra context as to why there's that bitter hatred toward her. It's not because of her, it's because of him, the guy who died. Whereas this, they kind of painted as like her being the villain to blame for it. Because it is heartbreaking for her too. It's like, what do you do when you're in a marriage with someone who just doesn't love you? And we've seen that with a lot of films since, like Brokeback Mountain being a very recent example of a mainstream Oscar film that tackled those kind of themes and stuff, and very overtly. So it is just a shame that like the censorship got in the way of like something that it was really revolutionary for the time to address something like this. The idea that like, no, there were just homosexual people who were in marriages, and that was something that was like taboo that they were trying to break down with the play, only for the movie to kind of set it back. And I do have the Tennessee Williams quotes. He was very unhappy with the screenplay, and he did say, quote, "This movie will set the industry back 50 years." And I do think there is some validity to that, in the sense that like this is such a progressive story that you're really kind of taking away the one element that made it so progressive in the first place. And that's a shame. But again, it's like, hearing your two opinions, it's like it works fine on its own. It's just hard when you're going into that with the context. It was hard for me to kind of judge it as its own thing, because there was that glaring, absence in a way, and I don't really know what else to compare it to necessarily. But it's like if your favorite book got adapted into a movie, and your favorite part of the book or your favorite character was completely cut out of it, and I do think that could be like a valid kind of approach to what I'm getting at, because I do think the film does work on its own, but it's hard for me, the viewer, to separate what I know already to, inform that, and I do think it just makes it stronger having that subplot. It makes it more unique and identified, because as Carly said, it's a really good, family drama. But I've also seen a lot of dramas where the family doesn't get along, and the one father's sick, and the wife and husband aren't getting along. And like, I feel like all that stuff is a basic template to fill in with all these little nuances. But the one big nuance that was so nuanced and fresh and original at the time is the thing you're not adding in, to where it just, for me, felt a little bit more generic because of that, so it's a very interesting perspective. And I'm not trying to say y'all are wrong, because I know this is a very well acclaimed, very beloved movie. So it's one of those things that I think if you aren't as familiar with it, and this is your first introduction, it could be a really impactful and really beautiful story. And then just talking about the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, like just the hotness of it too. Like Tennessee Williams loves to set all his plays typically either in the South or like in a farm rural setting where there's like, heat plays a big factor in a lot of his plays. The idea of heat kind of being this physical embodiment of this darkness and this lingering tension and depression. And I just feel like in this film, because you don't have all that stuff packed into it, just the sizzling and the heat of it all, it didn't feel like that energy to me. It almost felt like a little bit more toned down, a little bit more lax, to where like the kind of depressing performance was a little bit more dull than it was like profoundly depressing, if that makes sense. Like I was almost kind of bored by the energy that Paul Newman was giving off. And I love Paul Newman. Like I think I've given him my award on the show for The Verdict. Like I love Paul Newman, but it was just hard because like I was like, oh, this is like such a tired performance, which makes sense with the context of he's just lost the love of his life. He killed himself. But when you don't have that, it's just like, oh, this guy's just such a drab. But I get it, like that might be impactful for some, but I wish there was a little bit more heat, a little bit more tension, a little bit more bite, a little bit more of a pace to it. That is what makes Tennessee Williams plays so good. That quick kind of fiery intensity that I feel like is missing a little bit. It almost feels like we're trudging through caramel rather than hot fudge. Like there's a slowness to it. There's a goopiness that I just can't quite tap out of. But that's my rant. I'm not as harsh as I thought I'd be. I thought I'd be like, damn the Hays Code, you suck. But like, I'm just chill about it. I'm like, it's not my thing, not my favorite. And it's a shame. I wish I could have liked this because I was really excited to watch this. I was like, finally, I love Tennessee Williams. But yeah.
It wasn't not harsh. Especially with like you go back to like last month when I feel like we had such a divide with like Romeo and Juliet, and then now I feel like we flipped. Because you don't like a movie that I really liked. So I just, but I don't think you're wrong. I totally see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And I think as you explained, when you read a play first and then you watch the movie, it's just so hard to kind of extract that. Like that's what you wanted to see was the stuff in the play. And I think just because I got such a different read on it, just like watching the movie, that I'm just like, this whole other element that you've added that was originally in the play, of course, so it should have been adapted that way. I can't like take that away and say, well, I'm glad that wasn't in there. That would have just made a different movie. So the movie that we did get, I actually really liked, and I just like, because I just got a very different read on it when it was like, the woman who is, upset that she can't have kids, or at least they haven't been trying, because you have this whole thing. And even though it's not, or at least even if it's, a little bit hinted at, it's not necessarily a queer relationship that they're talking about, but like at least a deep friendship that he had with his football buddy. And then, of course, him being, this kind of failed athlete, and just all of that kind of combined. And then the infidelity that he thought that she had, but then, with, his alcoholism and everything that, he had, they had like this, divide between them that they just couldn't reconcile. And so to see them at the very end, not saying that, it had all of the steam that you're talking about, but at the very end, when she lies and says, "Big Daddy, I got your present," and it's a grandchild, and then everyone's like, whoa, except for the one wife who's like, "You're lying," and then she goes up, and then he's like, let's make it. I'm done with lies. Let's make it not a lie, and they throw the pillow, and you're like, shit, they're about to get it on. So I don't know. I thought all of that really worked. Yeah. But then again, I would have found it maybe more interesting, or just as interesting but different, if they had included the queer thing. And I do think it's a shame that they did have a whole code to restrict stuff like that. But then now I also feel like we do get a lot of those stories, so that's a good thing too.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. Yeah, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like that's the thing, is like I wish so hard. Like I was very excited to go into this. Like I was very hyped up, and I do think this is not a bad movie, and that's the thing. It's like a bad adaptation, not a bad movie. And I think if you're not judging it as an adaptation, it's a good movie, and that's the thing. It's like the Harry Potter Goblet of Fire thing that Chad and I always talk about. I love Goblet of Fire because I've never read the book. Chad's read the book, so he doesn't like it as much, So I think that's one of the
Right.
things where, that's just kind of where the divide is. But I'm glad you guys like it because it is really well done. Like, it's well made, and that's, you can't take away the performances and the power. I mean, it is still Tennessee Williams writing, so it's like still gonna have great stuff in there. There's a lot of great stuff in there just by nature of it.
I do think it would be a much stronger film without the censorship. I'm kind of sad we can't see the world where we get this film with this stacked cast where it actually addresses that, because the Hays Code is horrible. But yeah, I am sad that we didn't actually get to see that. I think I read there was an adaptation later that was more faithful, like a TV movie or something like that. So.
Probably, yeah. A lot of these classics are remade a bunch. Like, I know the next film we're going to talk about has like 6 remakes, like in the last 10 years. So yeah, definitely. No, but I'm glad you guys liked it because it is a classic. It is one of those American classic films. So I'm definitely on the minority for this one for sure.
And I just wanted to add, like, especially towards the end, like the scenes that we got between Brick and his dad, I thought were really, really strong. Like when the whole materialism thing versus love versus, the thing where, you get to see Big Daddy kind of break down and, realize that his father did love him and stuff like that. And just like the familial, bond strengthening and stuff like that I really like. So I could see myself revisiting this movie a few times because I really did like it. I thought the writing was very good. Like you talked about Tennessee Williams. I'm sure they brought like some of the same like, quotes from it and or dialogue from it, which really worked. Especially, and then and then I also would like to go and read the play and kind of get that next level of progressivism that you guys have been talking about.
And I'm interested to rewatch it too because I do think going into it, it was almost like the glaring omission of the text was gone.
Right.
But I am interested to rewatch it because I do think there is at least an idea with the actors. Like, they have to have read the original play before doing the movie. And I do believe, I wonder if Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman knew that and they were trying to like feed into the subtext of it all, to where I'm interested to go back now knowing that the text isn't there to see if the subtext is still there. That if there are those moments where it's like, almost like she wants to ask him or talk about it, but he doesn't want to, and they do it with their eyes and their acting. I think that could be really interesting because I do think there's a world where, like, yeah, just because the Hays Code prohibits you from saying it on screen doesn't mean you can't portray that in your acting. And I think there is a world where, like, I could go back and watch this and be like, oh wait, no, he totally is gay. He's just playing it rather than saying it. And I think there's also something to be said about that. The idea of like, okay, if you have a code, you work around it. You show it through the actual body language of the characters.
That's true.
You show it through the subtext rather than anything else. And I've seen a lot of people, even just on Letterboxd, reading some reviews being like, oh my God, so much queer subtext. And I'm like, I'm glad they're getting that out of it because I do think that, the actors can bring whatever they want to a material, whether it's stated in the text or not. And I think that could be cool too, to see like, yeah, maybe they are playing into it. It's just, we are not getting it necessarily said to us, which can go over people's heads, which is not beneficial. But then if you do know that the subtext is there, then it could strengthen it even more. And I'm wondering if this does strengthen even more for you, Chad, having known even that subtext.
I mean, I think it goes to show, as soon as Carly said, the relationship between Brick and what's his name?
Skipper.
Scooter.
That's how that was my reaction, was like, holy crap, okay. Because I did get some sort of vibe when I was watching it. So I think you might be onto something with that.
Yeah. Very interesting though. Like, and yeah, some of the best acting. I mean, it really is just such a stacked cast. Between this and I guess Father of the Bride and Virginia Woolf, Chad, where do you fall on like Elizabeth Taylor? Are you still like getting new shades of her? Do you love her still? Like, it's not quite as good as Virginia Woolf probably, but like, do you love her in this?
Yes, I do. I really want to keep watching a lot of her performance. We didn't really get much of her in like Father of the Bride. It was more about like her dad.
Yeah, it's much more about
but
Spencer.
it was more of an early performance. But yeah, I want to watch like all of her movies.
Yeah, we'll get to Cleopatra someday, so we'll get to see.
Okay, well that's like a really long one. I don't know if I got the
like maybe not that one.
But,
yeah.
I still need to watch Virginia Woolf. That's on my watch list after I get past spooky season. I'm hoping to check that out.
There's definitely shades of this in there. Like, you can definitely see the kind of seeds planted that would become the tree in literally 10 years. That is Virginia Woolf. You could definitely see that here. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And I did want to add, I didn't mean to say that I love Cat on a Hot Tin Roof as much as Dylan loves Romeo and Juliet. I don't think that would be
No,
possible.
and that's fine. Like that's what the beauty of the show is for you to discover favorites that you didn't know were favorites, and then for
Right.
also us to have interesting discussions about the things that work or don't work. And again, like I said, it's like not a problem with the film; it's more so a problem of the film with the play in mind, which is just always so hard. Like adaptations are always so
It
difficult.
definitely is.
You know, it's always tricky. That's why I always tell people watch the movie first, because the book is usually better. But if you have the book first, the movie's never going to live up to it.
Mhm.
Some of those are exceptions.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are plenty of exceptions, but I do think, in general, usually people who love a book are not as happy with the movie. That's just kind
Yeah,
of how it
and the
usually
people, it's just like when the people complain about comic book movies, other than just the ones who hate comic book movies, are the ones who read the comic and they're like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
I'm like,
where's
don't read the
Mephisto in
comics.
WandaVision? Yeah, exactly. Cool. But Cat on a Hot Tin Roof also goes 0 for 6. It's a trend here today. It is nominated though for picture, for director for Richard Brooks, for actor for Paul Newman, actress for Elizabeth Taylor, adapted screenplay, and cinematography color. A pretty divided conversation here, but maybe we unite like we saw the great union of Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis in The Defiant Ones. Chad, tell us about The Defiant Ones.
The Defiant Ones, directed by Stanley Kramer, written by Harold Jacob Smith and Nedrick Young, cinematography by Sam Leavitt, music by Ernest Gold, starring Sidney Poitier, Tony Curtis, Theodore Bickle, Charles McGraw, Lon Chaney Jr., King Donovan, Claude Akins, Lawrence Dobkin, Whit Bissell, Carl Switzer, and Kara Williams. Synopsis: a black prisoner and a white prisoner flee when they receive the chance to escape while chained together.
Mm. Yeah, and this is a unique one where all three of us had seen this before for a
Yep.
common movie club that we're all in. So this was a second watch for all of us, maybe a third watch for some of us. I'm not sure. But Carly, you did say when you were talking to me about what slate you wanted to pick, you were like, I am very fond of a very specific actor,
Yes.
and I have a feeling it might be in this movie, Carly. So
Yes.
why don't you take it away first for the Defiant Ones and share your
Yes.
love for maybe a certain actor who has the same name as a city in Australia. I don't know, maybe. T.
Yes.
Sherman, 42, Wallaby Way.
Sidney Poitier is one of my favorite actors ever. He's amazing, and I just liked having an excuse to talk. Well, and just in general, I like this movie even outside of his fantastic performance. I think it's such like a classic premise. Like it's like, oh, these two guys are chained together and they can't get along, but they have to get along to survive. Like I feel like you've seen 1,000 iterations in that across movies and TV, and I think it's just a very classic premise. And I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was really good. Whenever we're with Sidney Poitier's character, and is that the guy named Joker? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever we're with those two, I'm like loving this movie. Like their interactions, their dynamic, the way they like learn each other and like try to get along and understand each other's perspective is really good. Both the performances are great, but again, my favorite is Sidney Poitier because he's just so amazing. One of the best actors ever. Like it's just real. It's so feels so what's the word? So the opposite of its time. It's very
Timeless.
ahead of its time. Timeless. Yeah.
Timeless, yeah.
Both
of those things.
it feels very like relevant to today. Like even though obviously racism looks much different today than it did in the 50s, it's still like very relevant. Like I think he even brings up like Black people teach their kids you got to be nice to cops if you want to survive. Like, and he has this whole rant about how they're told to just be nice, and like we have that exact same conversation and discussion today. And it's just so powerful hearing him talk about that. And like I like that he's not a racist. He's more just like looking out for himself and not really aware that, oh, you shouldn't use the N-word to a Black person because it's because of the history and that it's a slur against that population. And I just like their dynamic. I think it drags a bit whenever we go back to the cops because I do think it's good to have that perspective of the cops, what they're doing, but I feel like we had too many long scenes with them where it's like, I just want to see what Sidney Poitier is doing with Joker and like how they're getting along and how they're surviving. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Chad, what were your thoughts on Defiant Ones?
Oh, lot of similar thoughts to Carly. This kind of makes sense that this is like one that's, something that, feels kind of timeless. It is an early, like, progressive film. I love the conversations that they have together. Well, first, it's funny that the racists chained them together because they thought it would be a joke. They thought it would be funny. And then the whole thing, it's, don't worry about catching them. They'll kill each other within like 5 minutes or something like that, 15 minutes. They hate each other, but then they have conversations, and it goes down to the very real, thing that the more time you spend with someone who's different than you, the more you'll understand them, and the less other they are. The more like you're like, wait, this person doesn't look like me, but they're just like me. They have all the same feelings and thoughts that I do. They get pissed off at the same shit that I do. Like, when Curtis or Joker is basically talking about how he's angry that like everybody wants him to say thank you all the time and no one appreciates it, and is like, I gotta say thank you so many damn times, and then I'm tired of saying it, and then when Portier is like, he's like, how many times I have to say thank you, and then people call me boy, and just like how like the language is, you can have like it's hard to talk about. The language is like, so much meaning can be put into something like that. When someone calls you boy, it's like not like, it's so demeaning. And I feel like we even have things like that today with words, and how Carly was talking about like, racial slurs and things like that, and the meaning behind all of that. I love seeing these two like chained together, and how not only did they understand each other with words and like conversations, but just how much they had to like work together. There's like many scenes of them just working together to go down like rapids in the water, or climbing up cliffs and stuff like that, and just like the teamwork, to actually not get caught and to not die and survive. It's just such great like character building and relationship building, that it's very simple, but I think it's very effective in changing these two to grow to like each other. I mean, I think, Curtis gets chained more, but I love with the ending too, about how, at the beginning they don't like each other at all, and at the end, Sidney Poitier's character like sacrifices himself. Like, he doesn't die, but like he doesn't get away, because he's no longer chained to him, but they're helping each other, and that's why he gets caught. And then there's still like Defiant singing at the end, having grown as people and as friends.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like there's nothing else I can add to that, but no, it is no, it's great. I love I love hearing you talk. That's the reason I didn't try to butt in there, but I do think you both have hit the nail on the head in terms of why the discussions are so important, why this is such a timeless piece and an ahead of its time piece at the time. That makes sense. Yeah, I think that was the right grammatical sentence. I don't know. It's late. But I do think, there is a really interesting kind of mindset watching this, where the first time I watched this, I was like, this is common sense. Like it's hard with movies like this that are message pictures made so long ago, because it's like, no, the message has been made. But then I look at like the news every day, and I see the patterns continue in the real world, and I'm like, people still haven't learned. And I think that's what's important about these movies, is while for us, like speaking to the three of us and probably a lot of our listeners, it's like, we don't need this movie to tell us what is right and what is wrong. And I think that's where a lot of its power might not feel as fully felt, because we know the lessons. It's common sense to us, but I do think for the right person, I hope this would be a mind changer for someone who really hasn't come out of their shell in that sense, or someone who is so biased or has such strict, vision of what is or is not racist, and the whole idea of like, no, that's not racist, and it's like you're a white person, how are you to say whether or not something is racist in terms of like excusing it? Like it's like if you have not lived in those shoes, you do not understand the experiences, and I think that's what this film really shows. Is that idea of like learning how to just see something through another person's eyes by quite literally being chained to them and like having to literally share an experience with them, even if it's not as overt an experience as like quite literally stepping into the shoes of them. But I do think you bring up great points, like the idea of the themes of it being so timeless, that I hope this is a film that can still withstand the test of time 50 years from now, and that people can come around to and really enjoy and find ways to still find relevance in it, even though I do hope someday these films are dated to where it's like, I mean, like they're talking about racism, like black and white can't coexist. Like that must have been a bad time. But I feel like we still haven't reached that hump yet. I hope someday we can, where we look back on these movies and we're like, there was a time where we needed movies like this, and I'm glad we don't anymore. But until then, we still do need movies like this, and it's a shame. But it's good that this exists for that. And I do agree with Carly. I think every time it goes to the cops, I am a little less engaged, just because I do love so much just the two of them and their chemistry. It's almost like a good play when the two main actors go off stage. They do this a lot in plays where they give these kind of side characters a few scenes to let the lead actors get water or go to the bathroom during the show. We see this with concerts too, where like they're like, all right, now the band's gonna jam out for 2 minutes. Like I was at a Ben Platt concert and he just runs off stage and the band's just jamming. And he comes back on. He's like, all right, we're back. I love that stuff. But like I feel like that's what that serves. But in a movie, it's like, no, just stay on the guys. You can do that. You have a camera. But I get it. I get also wanting to just make it more cinematic in bringing in these other third parties to it. And the woman that he meets at the end too, being an interesting third party. I love that kind of twist where it's like you feel like she's there to help them, and then turns out she's just as racist and awful as everyone else. And that's really the true test. It's really like you love this woman, but you also want to stand for, breaking down this barrier of race and just indifference. And like when it comes to like real world societal issues and like your own lust and thinking with your other head, like what do you decide, when do you make that call? And I love how Tony Curtis's character makes that call and goes after his friend. I think that's a brilliant thing that a lot of people would shamefully probably admit they would do the otherwise. So I think that's a cool final way to like test this friendship. Now that we've done all the growing, now let's put it to work. Let's see if this is actually real. Like prove it to me, show me you care, and I love it. I think it's such a good ending for this film. And even if it is heartbreaking, it does show what is really important or what people should be taking away from it. So
and with that, like when you brought up that specific part too, I liked how it didn't feel like a white savior movie where it's like Tony Curtis goes and he saves him and he's the hero. It's like, it's not like that. It's like he goes because of, like you said, his friendship is tested, and he's like, I've changed and I like him now. I don't want to see him die because of decisions that I made. And then he goes and he stumbles into him. He's like, what are you doing, Joker? Like, what's going on? And then he has a chance to save Joker. So it's like a whole, like it's a back and forth, like they're saving each other. And so I like that a lot. But then also like the point when you made about, film almost being like a manifestation of pain, where if we didn't have so many problems in the world, well, I know we might not have a lot of movies because
true.
You have to.
Good movies come from broken people and broken systems. So yeah, I guess we have that to thank, but
and
not that we should thank racism for anything, but you know what I mean. Like we at least we have topics that we can, at least we have an outlet and an art form that we can talk about topics through,
Absolutely. And one other thing Carly was talking about, how like we've seen so many like adaptations of this, and I wanted to highlight one that I just realized might be kind of an adaptation of this, is Adam Sandler's Bulletproof. Where I
don't think I've ever heard of it until now. So
an action movie with Adam Sandler where he stars opposite Damon Wayans, and there's a whole plot. Damon Wayans is a cop. Adam Sandler doesn't know that, but they're friends, and then their friendship is tested when Adam Sandler shoots Damon Wayans in the head accidentally, and then they're handcuffed together, and then there's the rest of the movie, and it's awesome, and it has like a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's way better than that, I promise.
Yeah, no, I like how it's been remade so many times because it is, like Carly said,
Mhm.
like it feels like a timeless story in that sense where it's never the wrong time to tell this story. Hopefully, there will come a day where it is a dated thing to
Oh,
tell a story about race,
Mhm.
but
agree.
I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
see.
And
Um,
one thing I did, one
yeah,
quote I like from the end is when he's like, "Come on, man, you're dragging on the chain, even though they're not chained together anymore." I love that. That's
yeah.
cute.
Yeah, it's great. It's just so cool what you can do in just like 90 or 100 minutes and show this full arc of character. I mean, it's why movies are so engaging because it's like in real life, it obviously takes place over a span of days, but like you, the audience, feel like you've changed with them too. Even if you come
Oh
into
yeah.
this film with your own biases or lack thereof, where you are accepting, by the end, you can still feel like you've changed as a person. You feel like a better person, which I don't know if it can be said the same about like Green Book and Driving Miss Daisy and Crash and all these other movies that attempt to do the
No.
same thing. But like, what is it about this that like separates it from that? Because this is also a white director making this film. It's like it's very interesting that this doesn't feel like that, and I think that's a special quality. I think it's good, but like I wonder
Yeah.
why that is. You
I
know?
do
Just
wonder if Sidney Poitier had any input into certain scenes or the
Ooh.
script because like there weren't a lot of black men acting in Hollywood at that time. Wouldn't surprise me if he was able to have a little sway. I don't know how early this was into his career, but
Well, this is the first ever nomination for him and the first ever nomination for a black man for best actor. So this is a quite literally defiant film, and really defies the odds in that way. And I think it's really cool to see that he does become the first black man to win an Oscar as well, even though it's actually no, does he not win? Yeah, he wins for Lilies of the Field. He doesn't win for what he should win for, which is his double year that Chad and I covered of In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in the same year. I think
yeah.
it's cool. Stanley Kramer also did Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, so it's like kind of like there's a comfort there. You can tell that he feels very responsible with the burden, not burden, but like with the gravitas of what he has to tell in his stories. And you can clearly see because Sidney Poitier did work with him a few times that he is a respected voice that Sidney Poitier feels like is doing due diligence for this topic, which is good. Yeah.
I do think Carly might have a point that maybe just like the pure power of Sidney Poitier made this movie very good. But
Yeah.
then also like the fact that I was just thinking like, you know, maybe some like white people are different and some like actually know what true growth is and
Hmm.
others
Mhm.
don't.
Yeah. And yeah, like there's that aspect that you were saying, Chad, where it's like it isn't a white savior film because there's kind of that 50-50. And I would even say more sense the black man saves him in a lot of ways, saves his
True.
biases, saves his mindset, which I think is going to be interesting when we don't talk about Drive Miss Daisy, but like when we talk about the Green Book and Crash, I'm very excited to go back to those because Green Book was a film that I saw and I was like masterpiece. But then after hearing a lot of the like rumblings of why it might not be
Yeah.
as quite as ahead of its time as I thought it might have been. I was very naive, at the time. I was still a
Yeah.
college kid who didn't know better, but I'm interested to go back and see because there's a reason these films win and some of them this didn't win. And I think there's something to be said about that too. Maybe they weren't ready at the time. And even though Green Book maybe feels like, there's a better way to say it. I mean, we're not getting the Green Book right now, but I do think it's going to be interesting when we get there to just like compare because, it does feel like, at least the Academy is willing to accept a story about race in this way, which is good.
Yeah. Green Book is definitely deceiving in a way. That'll be a fun conversation. But the last thing I wanted to say real quick is just anytime you get to see Sidney Poitier singing in a movie, it's gonna be
Oh,
good.
it's like, oh yeah, it just opens your soul. It uplifts, which is great. And it does get this film 2 Oscars because it does not go empty-handed. It gets nominated for 2 out of the 9 Oscars it's nominated for. It wins screenplay and it wins cinematography, black and white. One of the only black and white films. Actually, there's 2, so it's almost half in this slate. But it is also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Stanley Kramer, Best Actor for Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, double nominee there. Supporting actor for Theodore Bickle, supporting actress for Cara Williams, and Best Film Editing. Now, I did say there was another black and white film to come, but that we'll have to wait for a little later because it is time for the Best Picture winner in beautiful Technicolor. It is Gigi. Chad, tell us about Gigi.
Gigi or Gigi
Gigi, sorry,
directed.
yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Directed.
It's not Jean Valjean. It's Jean Valjean. It is Gigi. That's correct. Remy El Ratatouille. Yes, I got it.
Directed by Vincente Minnelli. I have to go full Italian there.
I got
Written by Alan J. Lerner. Cinematography by Joseph Rutenberg. Music by Frederick Lowe and Andre Previn. Starring Leslie Caron, Maurice Chevalier, Louis Jordan. I'm trying to put like a spin on all these now. Miney Gingold, Ava Gabor, Jacques Bergerac, Isabel Jans, John Abbott, and Marie Helen Arnaud. Synopsis: Gaston's playboy lifestyle is challenged when he falls for a younger woman in Paris. So I did that synopsis by naming the guy, but not the woman somehow. Oh shit! Maybe that's my sexism there.
You mean the movie is not about Gigi? What? What?
Maybe. Based on the 1944 novella Gigi by Colette.
Yeah, this is a very rare case where the musical movie was made before the actual stage musical, so it's a very interesting inverse. Yeah, I remember Vanessa Hudgens, I believe, did the revival a few years ago where she played Gigi on Broadway. So, good casting, I guess. Maybe the Gigi is a bigger role in the show than she is in the movie. Yes, just to say asterisk before we even talk about what we think about the film. We stand with Liza and with Judy Garland. We do not stand with the director of this film. That's just to put that out there. But even though we are talking about the third of that family,
didn't know about
me neither. I'm googling.
Yes, it's fine. Yeah, you might not want to Google it. It's sad stuff, but they got away from that toxic relationship, and she got custody, so it's all good. We love Liza and we love Judy on this show. They both are picture this winners. This is directed by Judy's ex-husband and Liza's birth father. So just to put that out there before, in case we're singing praises of Gigi, we don't want to, it's the art and artist talk that we have to do for every disclaimer of people that we don't think are good people, even if they make good films. But good looking film for sure. Like they saw the Technicolor and they rolled with it. This is the era of like Technicolor musicals where everything is just so vibrant and beautiful and sweeping, and the costumes and the colors. It's sad that we don't use Technicolor now more nowadays. A lot of stuff is digital, obviously, so it's you don't get that real authenticity of like film and Technicolor. But the 50s were really the time. Singing in the Rain, and then going into the 60s with West Side Story, just like those vibrant colors. So wanted to first shout out first and foremost this and Auntie Mame, especially, both just use such great use of Technicolor to create a gorgeous looking musical. But let's talk about Gigi. Chad, Best Picture winner here. It's always interesting when we get to the winner for every conversation. This was a first watch for all of us, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Cool. So I'll go over to you first, Chad. What did you think of Gigi?
Sure.
Why are we all laughing? Don't we all love it?
I don't know. Like, it's
Best
weird
Picture,
because
sweep.
it's weird because it feels like you guys are more on my wavelength than I thought you might be, and I wasn't sure because I was like, I think this is like a very anti-progressive movie in a lot of ways, where because it is about Gigi basically she's younger. But she's like 27. Like the actress was like 27, but I guess Gigi was supposed to be like younger than that. But like she's basically literally being groomed to become like a mistress or like an escort, I guess you would call it. Like back in like older French society, I guess that's just what like young women did. I don't even know.
She's 15 and a half in the film.
Oh, okay, that's way worse than I thought.
I just wanted to drop that bomb in there to make it even deeper. Yeah.
But the movie opens with, and Dylan will get into it, live action Lumiere singing.
Okay. Yes.
Dylan will get into it, singing about how much he loves little girls. And then I'm just like, what the is going on right now?
Yeah, that was me squirming. It sucks for the podcast listeners here that are just watching Carly just like hold her head and like, oh no, like, oh shucks. And me just like physically just like having like an alien moment where like chest burster is about to come where I'm just like squirming, like something is deeply rootedly making me uncomfortable inside my body. But yeah, continue.
And then you have Gaston, who's kind of a piece of shit. Because he's like a rich guy who just like is quick, like has a short fuse. He gets pissed off at everything, flies off the handle at every little thing. Like even if he like loses at cards or something, everything everybody says, he's just angry and rushes out of the room or whatever. And then like he's I guess that's because it's okay at the time. He's going around, sleeping with everyone, and then the person he was originally with does it, and then he almost drives her to suicide.
Yeah, and then his friend says, "Your first suicide!" Like, oh my god, your first suicide attempt! Like, it happened. This is like a pat on the back. Like, you've achieved this checkpoint in the video game. Like,
And then
don't we love our hero of the story?
and I'm sorry I'm taking so long to get through this, but then
oh good, it's a long film.
yeah, but then it's just like a whole thing about like I feel like the movie like wants to give Gigi like agency, but she never like really gets it. It's like, some women don't choose marriage, and then it's like, well, some little girls are like, made to be escorts, as I said before, and then it's like, well, where's Gigi gonna go? And she's being like trained to be like this proper woman, and then you know and then you have Gaston, who's trying to figure out if he has a whole song where he's singing about how she's just a little girl, but he kind of loves her, and
the one
maybe
he said is like a sister to him, by the way. Yeah.
yes, exactly, and then like he kind of like it feels like he almost forces her, like she wants to marry him, and then like he never really takes what she wants into consideration. And I don't know. Someone else can actually talk about this, but I feel like I'm on the money here.
No, you're getting there. I mean, I think it's important to hit those plot beats because it doesn't all come together. It's not like one coherent story. It feels like a bunch of other like little fragmented things kind of stitched together with like very loose like scotch tape, But I do think on the one point Chad mentioned Lumiere, that is a funny joke. David Sims, co-host of Blank Check, New York critic, love David Sims. His work is great if you haven't read it. But he posts long actual published reviews, but on Letterboxd he does like one-liners because it's a fun place to do that. And he wrote that Maurice Chevalier is literally just like real life Lumiere, which like the second you have that in your brain and you watch it, it just makes so much sense. He's the guy who's just not really relevant to the story. He's like related to the guy, but like doesn't have any real purpose except to just like kind of be in the scene and comment on how lovely love is, and we're in France, and be our guest. Put a napkin around your neck, and it's like, and it's just so funny. But I honestly think it's an energy that is needed in this film to at least keep things going, because the story there, as Chad has recapped, is just not there. Before Carly, I'll give you a second to but I just need to talk through these lyrics real quick of Thank Heaven for Little Girls. That's the name of the title, which was written to be like, oh, isn't youth wonderful? Not like little girls are like attractive, but just think about the lyrics and why it might not be in the best taste here. Each time I see, I'm not going to sing it because I don't want to be on the record singing it. Each time I see a little girl of 5 or 6 or 7, I can't resist the joyous urge to smile and say, thank heaven for little girls, for little girls get bigger every day. Thank heaven for little girls. They grow up in the most delightful way. Those little eyes so helpless and appealing. One day will flash and send you crashing through the ceiling. Thank heaven for little girls. Thank heaven for them all, no matter where, no matter who. Without them, what would little boys do?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
And like, I get it. The idea of like, you raise women, you raise little girls well, and they grow up to be really beautiful, amazing women. And like, how lucky are we that these women are raised well and prim and proper? And I do think there's a movie there where like, Gigi defies the stereotypes in a similar way of Auntie Mame, where she's like, no, fuck feminism and proper and like left hand fork and knife on this side of the table. Like, fuck that shit. Like, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to be rambunctious, but she's 15 and a half and she's in a relationship with her brother, and it's weird and I don't like it. Carly, talk about it. I need you to talk about it.
Oh God. So I should like, minus not even talking about the little girl thing. I should like a film like this. I love friends to lovers romances where it's like, oh, I didn't know I love her, and then I realized that I do. Like, I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, first of all, the pacing is so weird. Like, it took me so long to realize, oh, this isn't about Gigi at all. She's not the main character, even though the title says she is.
It's like a Lolita thing where it's like she's on the poster, it's her name in the title, but it's not about her.
Lolita's a great comparison. It's just so creepy, and like it's like, it's one, you know, it's like if he was dating her and she was a teenager, like whatever, just don't keep saying it. Like, do you really have to keep mentioning how young she is? Like, because there are age gaps in other movies that I can kind of just forget about because I'm like, okay, it's creepy, but I can go get past it. But they keep bringing it up. I'm like,
yeah, like when you draw attention to it so many times, it almost makes it seem like you're trying to validate it for yourself by mentioning it so many times because it makes you feel better about it. But it doesn't.
It's just,
it'll never make her older. Like it just won't.
And the pacing makes this feel longer than Auntie Mame. Like it makes it feel, it does not feel like a short film, even though the runtime isn't very long. Like in general, like looking at the story, if I was told the story minus the little girls thing, I would probably be like, oh, I'll like that movie. But like the way they play it out, the way it happens, it just, and like they didn't, at the beginning I was a little into it, not trying to take the little girls thing out. Like when they go ice skating, I think it's kind of cute. Like their chemistry isn't bad. Probably because she's not 15 in this. The actress isn't 15, so that's probably why the chemistry is not the worst. But like the pacing's weird. The escort thing is weird because it's never properly explained. And I don't know if that's a 1950s thing or if that's just that it's a weird thing that they don't. It's just odd to me. For like, I was Googling it, trying to figure out what are they training her for? Because it was very weird. Yeah. So I was shocked when I read this. Got 9 awards. I shouldn't be too shocked. This is the same Academy that gave Roman Polanski a standing ovation.
Yeah,
but
it's tough because it's like 9 awards, and you read through them, and like we talk about them at the end, but let's just go through them though. Like adapted screenplay, I don't agree with, but like director, if you're gonna give a picture, I guess it makes sense that it gets director. But like the other awards it gets, like the song Gigi, probably the best song of the year. Scoring, like yeah, it's got a good score, I guess. Like the art direction, the costume design, the cinematography, the film editing, like it's a really well-made film. Like as I opened with, I wanted to open with the biggest positive because I think it is a very glaring positive. I think it honestly makes it so much better than it would have been otherwise. But it is gorgeous. Like it is really beautiful to watch, and just every single like frame of this thing could be a portrait on a wall because of how well colored and just beautifully set and just well imagined it is. And that's what the shame of it. And I get what you're saying about it, Carly, where the opening scenes are so inviting because, you know, you're in France and everyone's having a great time and everyone's walking these fresh lawns, cut grass, and the smell of croissants in the air, and it's great. And Maurice Chevalier is saying, "Be our guest," even though he's singing about little girls. Like it's a comfortable vibe because it is this like kind of escapist kind of movie musical storybook like quality. Like when Paddington opens the pop-up book, it feels like that. And I think that's the hardest part because I'm watching it. If I mute this film, it's probably my number 2 or 3 on my list. Like I really do think it's gorgeous, but I think it's just got so much in it that it's just hard to separate from the overall enjoyment of everything that's going on. But I get the sweep in the sense that like of the films, like this feels like it would be the tech sweeper, and then it just happens to also get picture, director, screenplay on top of it, and it doesn't even get acting. So it's even more puzzling because I bet if like 1 or 2 of these actors got nominated, maybe they win 2, maybe it sweeps 11, and maybe it ties Lord of the Rings. Like we might live in a world where that happens, which is just so wild because I don't think anyone talks about this nowadays. Like this is not a heralded film. I mean, the aesthetic of Gigi, like I've seen posters of it in some people's like houses, like it's a iconic poster, iconic figure, but it's like this film is not talked about, and I think there's a good reason. I also think the songs are not that memorable, which also doesn't help when you're looking at like Singing in the Rain, West Side Story, Sound of Music, all these songs where it's like you could list 6 right now off the top of your head. You know, I think that's the tough thing about Gigi. There's no iconic songs that like, oh yeah, that one I know that. Like there was never that in this thing. And even if you had never heard a song in like Sound of Music or West Side Story, like you're still humming them later. This is not that case, you know.
I do have a fun fact about the cat.
The cat, yes, fun facts.
I mean, might not even be a fun fact because it's okay. So Leslie Caron, she played Gigi, and the cat they got reacted very violently to her, apparently. But the director was insistent that the cat stay in the movie, so they drugged the cat for the majority of the film.
Oh my god. That
does not surprise me, sadly. Yeah, it's an interesting fact, but yeah, it's a fun fact, but it's a sad fact. Like it's like really like you can't just find another cat, or like maybe just don't have the cat, or don't ever pick up the cat because like the cat seems like it's chilling in the back. Maybe it was going crazy regardless, but like I get it if she picks him up and it's like, okay, no, like the cat's not reacting well, then just don't have her pick it up. Like, why do you need to
I
make the cat
know.
suffer because of it? You know?
I mean, you said the
Exactly.
director wasn't a very good guy, so I guess that's another
Yeah,
hit
I mean, he
against him.
drove Judy Garland to attempt suicide, so that should tell you all you need to know. So that's kind of where we're at. But I you know, whatever. He designed a really good movie, but like animal cruelty too. Like you're really trying to get on, especially Chad's nerves, and mine as well. But all of us, I mean, we
Oh
would
yeah.
all stand for animal cruelty. But at least the cat probably it wasn't like harmed in a way, but it's
Yeah.
still not responsible.
That's what I was kind of like wondering. I'm actually like veering off like from the cat thing. That's actually kind of what I was wondering about though, with Dylan, because I know like you're such a huge musical fan. This is musical, so I was like wondering like how you felt about like the music in it, because when I first watched it, I was like, I'm not digging like any of these songs, but then I listened to the soundtrack to try and figure out like more of the story and
From
trying
this
to
movie or like one of the musical
from the
soundtracks?
movie.
Okay, gotcha.
And just trying to figure out if I dug them more. And I think I did like on second watch, but you're right, there's like none that are iconic. And then also the fact that the main star Leslie Caron didn't sing, she was dubbed. And I wanted to shout out the person who actually sang.
Yes, please
So
do.
I'm gonna look that up
Looking
if
up.
you
Cool,
want
cool.
to talk about.
No, but yeah, no, I'll go off of that because I do think it's interesting because like musicals in the slate, it's obviously like, oh well, that's gonna be Dylan's number one because he's a musical fan. But it's kind of like saying like I love eggs. I love eggs any way you cook them, soft, hard boiled, scrambled, over easy, poached. I will eat any eggs, omelet, you name it. I love eggs. But if you crack a shell into the eggs and I'm biting it and there's a crunch, I'm not going to eat the rest of it. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I love eggs, but if you serve me an egg and you haven't deshelled, if a shell cracks
Yeah,
into the bowl, it's not edible. And I think that's the thing is it's like, just because it's a musical doesn't make it just like, all right, well, it's a musical, so it's okay. Like, I honestly think because it's a musical, it's almost more heartbreaking when I don't love it. Because I'm
yeah,
like, you really have to do very, very big things to make me not at least enjoy a musical. Like I just enjoy singing and dancing. And that's another thing too. And I read a review about this. It's like it really makes me appreciate musicals where they actually sing and dance. Because I think that's the thing that people don't realize. Is musicals is not just about the singing, but look at
yeah,
how many great musicals. It's also because of the dance, and it's not dancing. It's the actors singing, which like we see a lot of that nowadays in like modern musicals as well. Like Dear Evan Hansen, Next to Normal. These musicals where characters sing, they don't really dance a lot, but they've learned how to like create that art form in and of itself. Back then, it's like these songs feel like they need dance numbers of this era. You've got the Technicolor, you've got a lot of talented people, a lot of costumes, you got a big ass budget. This is a very profitable film and a very big budget. Give me a dance number too. Thank heaven for little girls. Get a bunch of weird pedophiles together and at least make a dance number of it. Like, at least give me that. At least make me entertained. But I mean, like Maurice Chevalier, one of our legends, so like I'm not gonna fault him. When he's singing, it's great. But it's like at least like consider yourself. We covered it last month on Oliver, like on 68 with Oliver. It's like that is a beautiful, sweeping musical number. Do they need to start dancing in the streets? Not really. All Artful Dodger is saying is, "Hey, Oliver, you're one of us." That's all he has to say, and you could just say it. But no, it's a musical, so you're gonna sing and dance. Let them sing and dance. I don't understand it. I'm going nuts. And honestly, I'll be honest. I hate to say this. This wasn't even my least favorite because I think it's so gorgeous to look at. But now that I'm thinking about it, this pisses me off to no end. And I just to win and to sweep. It's Lord of the Rings than this. Like, this is crazy to me. Woo! I'm heated today. If you can't tell, I haven't eaten dinner. I am heated.
Yeah, one of the reasons I picked this slate because I was like, oh, there's a musical. I love musicals.
I get to talk musicals with Dill. How calm and beautiful will that conversation be?
that felt. Speaking of problematic people, that felt like the that big rant in Christmas Vacation, where he ends it with "Holy shit."
Yeah. No, instead of shells in my eggs, they literally serve me that burnt turkey from Christmas Vacation. That's what this movie is for me, and it sucks because it's so beautiful to look at. That's what's horrible about it. Oh.
Yeah, so I didn't know how Dylan was gonna feel about Gigi, and now like I should have guessed. I should have guessed when he started singing about little girls. But I did want to shout out, the actual singer who apparently dubbed a lot of like musicals, but like has a very short Wikipedia.
Mhm.
Betty Wand. And it's like, people who are like truly talented, like Betty Wand, just don't get the credit that they deserve sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's 6 years removed from Singing in the Rain, and they didn't learn.
Right.
You give credit to those who can do it. And listen, some of my favorite films, I mean, we covered Oliver last month. Chad loved it, adored it. I really like it. And that lead singer is dubbed. West Side Story, one of my all-time favorite musicals, those singers are dubbed. Dubbing is fine, but then give the credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Gigi starring this
Oh,
and this, or voiced by this. Like, give that credit because they work hard.
Betty Wand did some of, not all, but some of Rita Moreno's singing in West Side Story.
There you go. Very interesting. Rita Moreno was dubbed. Interesting. Yeah,
Partially.
some of, I guess. Yeah, partially. But that's the thing. Like, that's classic Hollywood for you. And this isn't like Hays Code. Obviously, if anything, this is pushing it. But I do think this is an example of Hollywood in its weirdest era, where like it feels like there's films that want to progress the movements, and in certain films like this feel like we're just like kind of stepping backward. And this is an example of that, where I just feel like you're trying so hard to make it a feminist piece of empowerment, but like as Chad said in his description, it's about Gaston. It's not even about Gigi. I think there's a validity. I don't know if Gaston is from the original La Belle et la Bête text, but I wonder if for Beauty and the Beast in 1991, if they named the villain Gaston because of this. Like, I really do wonder, because I don't know if he's in the original text as Gaston, or if it's just like they took inspiration from this, but I'd be very curious to know. But
I was thinking about the movie, and I was like, which Gaston is worse?
There's no pictures, like he just hates books that have no pictures. I mean, he's harmless. Just kidding. No, he's a bad dude. But like, that's just toxic masculinity. This guy is like, it's weird because like they're not trying to comment on it, and they're trying to comment on it that he's like a player, and Gigi's like, no, you can love, you don't have to just sleep around, you can love. But it's like, it's your sister, like and that's the thing that Carly said, they draw attention to it. If you just didn't bring it up, it wouldn't be a problem. But the fact that you're like, she's a sister to me, and then he's like, do I love her? It's like, ugh, like I don't want to see this shit. Like, no. It's a shame though. Are there any positives that that you guys have to highlight aside from, I guess, the style? Because I've been very high on the style. Are there any moments you did like? Are there any performances maybe?
I liked Leslie Caron as Gigi. I thought she was pretty good in the movie. And I did like some of the songs. I liked there's that song. Oh, hold on, I wrote down the note. The song called I Remember It Well, where it's very clear that Maurice Chevalier does not remember it very well. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I think Maurice Chevalier does a lot of the heavy lifting here. I mean, we covered him, I forget what year it was, the Love Parade. It might have been like the very like third year. It might have been the All Quiet on the Western Front year. Like, it was way back when. And he was like the leading man. So it's kind of cool that like he is now like the older kind of sidekick, old man, kind of just narrator in a sense. Like, it's cool that they're still acknowledging like the old Hollywood stars of then, even though this is really only like 20 something years afterwards. And that was a point I was going to bring in with Defiant Ones of Sidney Poitier. Less than 20 years before this was like Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. And it's crazy how in just 20 years, it's like we went from Hattie McDaniel literally not being able to sit in the Oscar ceremony to accept her award to Sidney Poitier winning Best Actor. I think it's really cool. But that has nothing to do with Gigi, but that's a thought I just thought of that I meant to bring up.
One thing I liked from Gigi, I like the donkeys. I love the donkey bit. That was cute.
Absolutely. I mean, animals are fun and cute, and like, just give me more animals. I mean, like, I guess not, because Dr. Dolittle was pretty bad when we covered that. So maybe more animals is not the way, but more animals in a good sense. No more drugging cats. Don't drug cats. We do not advocate for that. No, anti-drugging.
Or paint horses, or whatever you're trying to do to an animal. Don't do it unless it's good.
Yeah, the things they do for entertainment.
Do nice things to animals, please.
Yeah, this is one though that I am interested, like Auntie Mame, to like watch the musical, like the stage musical of it, because I wonder if they fix it, especially because they did a revival. I think it was like 2018 or something with Vanessa Hudgens as Gigi, and I wonder, because they marketed it as like Vanessa Hudgens is Gigi, so I'm wondering if she just has more agency in that film or that show, and I wonder if like they change some things to make it a little bit more.
Right, maybe they don't mention the
palatable
girls as much.
yeah, or maybe like thank God for mothers who raise good girls to grow up to be strong women. Like that's a lot. That's a mouthful, but like it's a better message than like, thank God little girls are so innocent and pure and they're gonna grow up for more. And I'm like, yikes. Anyway,
Speaking of this conversation, I do have to give my cat a pill later.
that's fine. Hopefully, you're able to reenact the scene later and then share it with us of Gigi. You
No.
put on a nice little wig, Chad. No, okay.
It's
I'll
gonna
be
be
making
hard.
I'll be making croissants later, regardless. In inspiration, in spirit of this year. And Gigi wins 9 for 9, as we said. I'm gonna rattle them off one more time because this will blow your mind. Picture, director for Vincente Minnelli, adapted screenplay, scoring of a musical film, song for Gigi, art direction, costume design, cinematography, color, and film editing. And if
Adapted
there,
screenplay. It does
I
not.
know, yeah, I want to know what it's adapted from because
That's the one that hurts me more than the
if
best.
this was the
picture.
best adapted screenplay, then like that book must have sucked. Anyway, if this is a good adaptation,
The 1944 novella Gigi by Colette.
there you go. I will not be reading it, but I'll at least skim it. But yeah, if there's a lunch cafeteria, I am sitting as far away from the Gigi table as I can. I am sitting at a separate table. I do not want to be part of that crowd. I do not want to be hanging out with the cool kids who swept. I'd rather sit with a bunch of other actors like Wendy Hiller and Deborah Carr and Burt Lancaster in the movie Separate Tables. Chad, tell us about Separate Tables.
Separate Tables, directed by Delbert Mann, written by Terrence Rattigan, John Gay, and John Michael Hayes. Hayes Code? No, it can't be. Cinematography by Charles Lang. Music by David Raskin, Harry Warren, and Harold Adamson. Starring. We started the show with The Shawshank Redemption, starring Rita Hayworth,
Yes.
Deborah Kerr, David Niven, Burt Lancaster, Wendy Hiller, Gladys Cooper, Kathleen Nesbitt, Felix Almer, Rod Taylor, Audrey Dalton, and Priscilla Morgan. Synopsis. Secrets are revealed and relationships are tested during the off season at a hotel. Based on Separate Tables by Terrence Rattigan.
Cool. Yeah, no, this one's aged really well, right? No, let's talk about it. Separate Tables. Yeah, very interesting film. A lot of it's kind of the similar thing with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, where it's like a bunch of characters in a space, all having different conflicts and how they interact, and all that. But I forget who had the first word for Gigi last time. Was it Chad? Was it Carly? I forget.
was Chad.
It was Chad. Okay, Carly. So you're gonna take it away with Separate
Okay.
Tables. Give us your take.
This it's hard to, I don't really know exactly how I feel about this movie.
Okay.
Because I really like the different characters and like the what they're really, it's just really interesting, all the different characters. It took me a while to figure out who was who, just because they have all these little side characters that just pop in here and there.
Yeah, and like one's related to one's marrying one but loves another, and that one is married to this person.
Yeah, I did like all the different relationships and like the different characters and like how they're reacting to each other. And like, I thought that was really interesting. And I liked how there wasn't really any character that was wholly good. I think part of that is us viewing it through our present day lens, but there were also like just characters that were like, I think was it Sybil's mom, who's like just kind of a shitty person and is like very judgmental. But it's weird because she wants to kick was it Pollock out because of the sexual assault, and it's like, well, she's a bad person, but like what she's saying is actually very reasonable to not want someone who sexually assaulted several women in a dark theater. And it's just so it's hard to know exactly how I feel about it, because I think the different characters and the different character beats are really good and interesting. And I like hoped, like in the beginning of the film, I was like, okay, let's see where it goes with this, because it doesn't necessarily, just because you have a character who's like sexually assaulting doesn't mean it's a bad movie. And where they land with it, I was like, wish they had gone a different way with it. But I did still enjoy the characters, and I did still think the plot was good and engaging. But has some stuff in it that's not the best.
Yeah, my joke earlier about like, oh, this is aged well, right? It was a joke because obviously there is one glaring element that hasn't. But I do think it's very interesting to look at a film where it's like, this has this in it, but is the film advocating for it? Even if it's not advocating against it, like, how do they still how do they just tell a story in general, even if it's not necessarily a story that you agree with or that you personally align your views with. And I think that's important for all films. Like where like Gigi, it's like it's almost so forceful that it's like hard to separate the art from the, the context of modern times. And it's like with this film, there's certain parts of it that's hard to separate what really happens nowadays in regards to the handling of certain subject matter. But it's also worth noting that this film can still do things very well, and I do think it's very interesting because I think this is probably the best directed film of any of them. Just the way it's staged, the way it's edited, and on the different kind of intertwining, plot beats and characters. Like I do really think they do a really good job. Who's the director again? Delbert Mann, who I'm actually kind of unfamiliar with. I had never seen a film of his. I know he did Marty, which won Best Picture, which we'll talk about someday. But I do think what he does with the concept and how he brings it all together is really good. But it's also but there's also something off-putting about certain things that are excused or not excused. Certain characters who are vilified versus not vilified versus kind of shown in a heroic light versus characters that can acknowledge that what they're doing is bad, but then still also don't get any consequences still. So it's a very interesting moral ambiguity. And I get that, Carly. It's like you're almost conflicted because you don't want to side with these characters because they each do something that is off-putting, but it's also like, is that the point the film's trying to make? But even if they don't go as far as they should in addressing it, doesn't mean they're not at least bringing attention to it at the same time, and I think that's a very nuanced discussion, especially for 58. This is a time of the Hays Code where you can't go certain depths of certain topics, but you also kind of excuse a bunch of other topics too because you don't want to deal with like the controversy of it all. Like, everything's happy in the 50s and in the 40s, like everything's great, everything's grand, we're out of war, everything's hunky-dory, but I do think this film pushes the boundaries in certain ways, but also kind of takes a few steps back in others. So very interesting, very, very interesting. Chad, what were your thoughts on Separate Tables?
Yeah, this one's interesting because I saw a little bit of like critical reception before I watched it, and I hate doing that because then it like makes me like
skews your perspective
differently about it. But I went into it and I was like, I'm gonna just see if I like it or not, and I really liked it. And then I was wondering, I was like, should I be liking this? And then I just really did. I don't know. I just like how it's basically like two plays were like morphed into one, like screenplay, which feels like it might not work. And maybe those are the tables, the two plays are the separate tables morphed into one thing. But I like how they do it. And it almost kind of felt like the Robert Altman movies, like Nashville and what's the other one we covered?
Gosford Park. Yeah, where like everyone kind of has their own story, even though they're all set amongst the same location. Yeah.
Yeah, and he kind of handles it more like cohesively, I think, in a lot of his movies, where he's able to kind of like handle all this chaos that's going around in the hotel or whatever that he does, or the city. And this one maybe not as much, but I like the two very strong stories that we get with the man who has done something in his past, the old man who's done something in his past that he tries to hide, and then it comes to light. And then the question of what do we do with this man? And then you also have a young woman who is very repressed by her mother. Carly brought this up, and how her mother may be right in some ways. It's almost like the Big Lebowski thing. You're not wrong, but you're an asshole, kind of deal.
Yeah.
And you have her where she really loves this guy. Like, I guess the conversation she has with him, she's like, you're so experienced and you've seen stuff. It doesn't like really necessarily feel like a romantic sexual thing, but maybe like a, almost father-daughter, like he's the father that, she never had, or like, because she doesn't really like her mother. She never can stand up to her mother.
He fills that void for her. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe it is kind of a romantic thing and she just kind of like thinks he's handsome or something. But I like how that plays into the idea of when she finds out, with everyone else just judges him and just says, I mean, of course, he's done terrible things, but when she does it, it's like deeper. And for him, when everyone judges him, they're like, everyone just judges me all my life. And I've been, affected by this. It's something that I can't really help. if you watch, Dylan's gonna watch this soon. If you watch it also dives into this where someone does something terrible, but then it's like the stuff around it. Like, if someone's like, I need help and I've never had help. I've never gotten like the therapy one would need, or the guidance that one would need to be able to stop. And I'm not obviously not advocating for or defending someone who would do a terrible thing, but I'm saying like I understand where this movie's going for, where it's like you know engaging with this person, and the way that he and the young woman who they have a relationship with, I like their encounters where she pushes him away and she's like, what you've done is unforgivable. So it does kind of uh you know uh pu- punish him in a way, but I understand where you guys are talking about, like where at the end he's kind of just accepted back into the thing, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
maybe the police should have been brought. Well, I mean, it's in the news, so I imagine.
Yeah. It's almost like he gets off a little too easy for the audience. It's almost
Yeah,
like at the end we're supposed to be like, oh, everyone accepts him, like, oh, good for David Niven. He's smiling and he's happy. And it's like and I think it's the problem is David Niven's such a good actor in this and so captivating that it's like when he is having that moment where no one's saying good morning to him. And I think we have to talk about the ending because the ending is the film. It really is the film where it's like that is the central crux. It's where the title comes from, Separate Tables, and it is kind of that main thesis statement of like who are we going to judge this man, are we going to continue to push him out, are we going to learn to accept him and not cancel him. It's a cancel culture a half a decade before it became like a prevalent thing, but it's also like the idea that as everyone slowly says good morning, just the way he like wells up with tears, it's almost hard not to root for him because David Niven's just doing such a good job. But in the back of my head I'm like, no, but this guy's done icky things, so that's what makes it so hard. And that's why I think it is at least an interesting piece of art, because it allows you to engage with that and kind of put yourself in the perspective of like, well, where would you side with this, and like would you be the person like rallying the mob against him, which I think is valid because he has done terrible things and you don't want him in this space with your daughter, but also being the daughter being like, I'm a grown woman, you don't have to try to protect me, like this is
yeah,
my relationship. But it's also like she suffered so much trauma and abuse that it's like she's just latching onto another guy who has admittedly abused others. So it's like hard to like accept
mhm,
that. But also I think it's good that the character acknowledges that he has done bad and acknowledges that. I think that's big. But then it's also like after that, then they all kind of welcome in with open arms and all say good morning. And the couple that is very clearly a toxic relationship, they sit together and they rekindle their love. And like the mother, gets her comeuppance or whatever, and they somehow blame the idea that she wants to like kick out the sexual abuser as like, oh, your faith and religion, almost kind of making it a religious thing the way she believes and all that. So like there's certain things that I think it does really well in acknowledging the problems, but then the resolution of it doesn't work. But then because of the acting and because of the way it's directed, the last sequence is just so captivating. Like every single person says good morning to him, I'm just like drawn in, even though I'm like
yeah,
watching myself kind of get swept up as they're all like kind of forgiving this guy. I'm also like there's an ickiness to that, but I'm also like drawn in just by the way it's staged and directed and written, where I'm truly conflicted. I really was surprised at the end because I was like, wow, that ending was so good, but I'm like,
Mhm.
but should I be liking this as much because of who he is and what he's done and what he's admittedly done and even felt remorse for. And that's what's tough. It's a very complicated situation, if anything.
yeah. But I do think it's like just saying something about, like you talked about cancel culture and like how we experience it very different now than we did then. I mean, it kind of still existed then, but it's just a more of becoming a social pariah. And now it's more like, the internet will come at you and basically get you fired from your job, and just like your whole life is going to be ruined. But I like how this like hotel is just more of a smaller side of that, where it's like all of these people are trying to cancel this guy, but really all they have bothered to get to know about this guy is the scandalizing thing about him, whereas the woman who actually has gotten to know this guy, experiences from a deeper thing. She's still what do you call it, like she's still deeply hurt by knowing that this person is problematic by it. It's almost like when you are a fan of someone who becomes, a problem, you almost feel it way deeper, that you're
Mhm.
just like, you stood for something that I thought was way different than what you've actually done. But then,
Mm.
like, wondering, like, can someone heal from this and actually become a better person? Are they then going to be forever just
Mhm.
that social pariah that we go, well, now you can never come back from what
Yeah.
you've done?
Yeah, and
Um,
I do think making him a predator and giving a number of how many cases and stuff does that character a disservice, whereas I think if, like, a way to make this better is, like, make it about, like, a black man staying at the hotel and all of them want him gone, and then at the end, he's sitting alone and they all kinda come to him, where it becomes more about, like, this general societal bias, because once you put a actual crime on the person, it becomes a little harder to be objective about it or subjective about it, because it's like, "No, he's done very bad things." Whereas I think if it's more like like maybe he's like homeless and he has enough money to stay at the hotel, but they're all kind of off put by the way he smells or the way he looks, or if it's
Mhm.
a race thing, or if it's a religious thing, or if it's like a sexuality thing. Like I think that is a little different. Like that would have been more impactful to where like they're all kind of slowly accepting him at the end than someone who is very clearly a very bad man, and that's what's so tough about it. It's like I wish it was almost like the guy had this more like forgivable circumstance to where we could feel for him in the end when he does it. But I think the forgivable circumstance in this case is it's David Niven, and he's acting so well that we feel for him because he's making us feel for him, if that makes sense. Like I think it would have been better if they had posed it as like maybe a racial commentary or something that it's a little bit more like definitively objective rather than like he
Mhm.
did this crime. It's more so he is this type of person, and that is why everyone
yeah.
is ostracizing him and then learns to accept him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
definitely a
even if
challenging film for
yeah,
sure.
I
Go ahead,
think
Carly.
I think even if they wanted it to be some crime, just making it less horrible, I think
Yeah.
would have helped. Like even if it was just like one woman who said like or like if he was in a relationship where a toxic relationship where he was like shitty to his ex or something like that. I think that would be more understandable because it's like everyone can do horrible things at times. But the fact that it's like it was several women and like he doesn't really seem that like doesn't seem to want to do penance for it or anything.
And that's another
Makes
thing
it
too is yeah, the film doesn't give him a sort of like consequence for it. It's like he just
Mhm,
kind of says like it's the way I am, I can't help it. And I think there's something valid to be said about that. Like it's really cool that a
mhm,
character is owning up to their mistakes, but it's also like but then it's like it's not like I need help, help me. It's more so just like it's the way I am and I need help, but not necessarily going that extra mile of getting it. And that's also where I think we have to look at it from the lens of 58. Like are they willing to do that when the code is in place, when there's like this like very, different type of mindset on this thing when this might not even be something that is talked about. I mean, we're looking at films that quite literally won Best Picture directed by evil people. Like it really is interesting to look at the different society leaps. And I think if this were made today, they would either make a bigger point to make it a consequence for this guy, or they would make it a different crime, something that could be a little bit more forgivable to make us, the audience, feel in that moment. But I don't want to take away from how good that ending is because it is really well staged.
mhm,
Just the way they all kind of, it is the separate tables all kind of coming together, the way they all kind of turn. It's like 12 Angry Men in a way, but it kind of fast paced. It's like very quickly turning. But, the idea of every single person individually coming around to it is really cool. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, and just to piggyback of what off you were saying about this, is that the time difference between 58 and now is like now we kind of have more of an expectation of people have more access and knowledge about therapy. And then back then
mhm,
it wasn't as prevalent of a thing. So
Yeah.
maybe he just felt like there was no help for him.
mhm,
But that's just a thought. Like they didn't really address therapy or anything like
mhm,
that.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering like how you could have made it better because I think you guys are right on the money. There are a lot of great discussions you can have about this because it is so kind of open ended, and there are good things as well as bad things about it.
Mhm.
But I'm sorry, I just wanted to bring up. There's a whole other like
Right. I
section of
was about to ask. I was like, now let's transition to the whole Burt Lancaster story because that's
yeah.
also in and of itself a very nuanced discussion as well because it deals with more physical abuse in a way.
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah, because yeah, it does. And because what I like about the movie too is like the different meaning of the separate tables where it's like everyone's at a separate table. Like we're all in this hotel, but like we all each have our own lives and different problems, and we don't all know about what is going on with everyone. and so there's secrets and they're all coming out and stuff. But it was like Burt Lancaster and Rita Hayworth, and they have like this whole past, and then they're meeting here, and he's in another relationship, and she's come to, I guess, fuck with him or something. And you have that whole vibe too, where she's like, it's almost like Dylan when we watched The Lion in Winter. And she had that whole relationship with them where she's messing with him the whole time, like, I slept with your father, and he's like, la 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 la. And then like in this one, it's kind of like a similar thing where she's just like, messing with him the entire time, and then he's taking the bait, but then they have like this weird like love for each other, but it's kind of like repressed, and like it feels like she does love him, and then like you brought up, there's actual physical abuse, and it becomes a whole thing where he feels like she is messing with him, but it obviously doesn't excuse actual like physical like hitting and stuff and whatnot. And I want you guys to talk about this now because
Carly, what are your thoughts on the whole Burt Lancaster, Rita Hayworth, and kind of Wendy Hiller too? Wendy Hiller is interesting because she's like kind of the manager of the hotel, so she's kind of involved in everyone's story. But also she's also engaged to Burt Lancaster, so it's like she's connected in that way too, which makes it interesting. But what are your thoughts on that one, Carly?
I thought it was interesting. Like this movie's really interesting because it just has so many characters and they each have their own different wants and needs. And I thought it was. I always like messy, toxic dynamics. I think they're fun to watch, especially when you can like separate them from real life. So I thought it was really interesting, just kind of the mind game that she plays with him a little bit. How she shows up just kind of to mess with him and maybe get him back. But I liked all their dynamics, and like I liked seeing them kind of bounce off each other. But I liked it. I thought it really added to the film and made it like have all these different layers of different things going on, and like all the characters felt like full people. Like no one felt just like a stereotype to me. They all kind of had their own things going on.
Yeah. And I think because you also do cross that line with Burt Lancaster where you quite literally, I think he like chokes out Rita Hayworth almost to death. It's like that whole idea. I think it can almost be a broader kind of portrait of like how women navigate toxic masculinity in this era. Again, they don't go as far as that because they also portray, her Deborah Carr's mother as like one of the toxic people in this trio. I guess there's like three people who are like very clearly the conflict. It's Burt Lancaster, it's David Niven, and it's Deborah Carr's mother. But I do think it's very interesting to see like how they all push back and how you can then root for like Rita Hayworth and Wendy Hiller and I wish there was maybe a scene with the two of them to kind of connect about it because like they're the other women and it's like they don't really get that piece between each other, I don't think. But Wendy Hiller was always fascinating because it's like we saw her in A Man for All Seasons. She actually won the picture of this award. Malcolm gave her the award, so it's like I was really excited to see her because this is the one she wins for too. And I like the purpose she serves as kind of the middleman in a lot of this stuff. And it does kind of make it all connected regardless, even though it does, as Chad say, feel like two screenplays mashed into one. There is that connective tissue, which I think then by the end, when you do have like the couple sitting at the same table, but they could not be further apart in their emotions. And then like everyone physically at separate tables. Like I just think it creates such a really good ending to where it feels like a good payoff for what we've been watching. Even again, if we can't necessarily reconcile with what this guy did, it is very just well conceived, well staged, perfectly edited, written, directed. Like I keep coming back to that last scene because it does kind of epitomize what this movie stands for. Even if I don't 100% agree with it, I think what it stands for, the movie conveys very well in its dressing and its direction. That last scene just has lingered on my mind.
Yeah, and I just find it fascinating to like just the idea of taking two plays, mashing them into one thing, and just making something new. I just think that's so cool, and I think it just was so well done in that way, and creates like such fascinating discussion that we've had.
Yeah, and I do wonder like if they were to do something like this today, how they would do it, like what angle they would approach it at. And I do think this could be something that's remade today because it's a very basic template. Everyone's in the same place. There's a lot of issues going on. There's someone who is like kind of has this lingering past that's haunting. There's this girl who's trying to crack it. Her mother's oppressive. Like there's a lot of things you can do with just this basic template that you could fill it in with more modern sensibilities that I think could be really, really interesting. Yeah.
And just add a murder mystery in there, and
why not?
Park,
yeah, like oh no, Wendy Hiller's dead. Like no, I don't want to wish that on her. Even though I think
the premise of this one was the one I was most excited to watch, just because I like film set in like one location where there's just all these different dynamics going on. So I would love to see this remade and like readapted in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's got the best elevator pitch. It's like even the Defiant Ones, which is just probably the best story. It's like, two men learning how to overcome their racism, like is a very basic story that at least in modern standards, Auntie Mame, a chronicle of a woman's life as this aunt influencing different people in their lives. Okay, Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, like all in a house, man's dying, couple hates each other, Gigi, pedophilia, but like here it's like there's like a very interesting elevator pitch. Like I think there's a very interesting story that could be built upon with remakes, and I think this is the one that has the least amount of remakes or reinterpretations. Like Gigi and Auntie Mame have been musicals, Defiant Ones has been remade a bunch, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a play, so it's been performed. So I want this to be like reimagined nowadays, and what you could do with like, I mean, you look at the lineup then, this is a banger lineup. Like Rita Hayworth, which we've never watched act before, Chad and I, which is really cool. It's kind of surreal. She's the poster in Shawshank. That was what he was referencing earlier, Andy Dufresne's poster. But it's like watching her and Deborah Carr and David Niven, Burt Lancaster, Wendy Hiller, Gladys Cooper, like these legends that it's like watching them all together. Like this must have felt like when Wes Anderson makes a movie, like when you put all those actors together. That's probably what this felt like at the time. So it's just kind of cool to see that, even though these people aren't necessarily as impactful to us now in a modern day. Like we obviously talked a lot about Burt Lancaster on here, David Niven, obviously James Bond. Like we know these guys, but it's like it's very cool to see just all of them together with the context in mind of like these were the biggest stars of the time. Like I think that's really cool. So cool. Any other thoughts on Separate Tables?
I just thought it was interesting how so many of the movies in this lineup were based off of plays. Because I feel like we see that every once in a while now, but I feel like it's not as common.
Yeah, and honestly, it's an easy thing to if you want to just get a movie made quick, a good star vehicle. Like it is a good thing to do because the script's already written. All you have to do is tweak stuff. So like, I wish there was more of it today. Maybe someday. We're getting some this year, which will be fun. But here we go. Separate Tables, 7 nominations. It does win two big ones: Best Actor for David Niven, Best Supporting Actress for Wendy Hiller. It is also nominated for Picture. It is nominated for Actress for Deborah Carr. It is nominated for Adapted Screenplay, Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedic Film, and Best Cinematography, Black and or white. It is and white. Sorry, it is both. But we do have now the difficult task, I think, more than ever, to rank these films, because I don't think there's a clear number one between all of us where like this is the one. It's like we like and dislike certain films. I think there's one that we all agreed we all disliked, but I do think it's very difficult to rank here. So let's do it. Carly, you're our guest. Why don't you take it away? Give us your number 5.
Okay. Shocking no one. Gigi is my number 5.
All right, Chad.
Gigi, yeah.
I originally had a different film here, but I think you've swayed me. I'm gonna go Gigi.
Yeah, Gigi was just in my ranking before, and then I was like, nope, conversation is telling me it's my least favorite.
Yeah, I think I'm the most passionately displeased with Gigi more than I am the other one. But I do think Gigi is just, there's enough glaring mistakes that even if I think it's gorgeous to look at, it's not there everywhere else. Carly, what's your number 4?
Auntie Mame.
All right, Chad, what's your 4?
Auntie Mame.
All right, this is where we differ. My number 4 is going to be Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So Carly, what is your number 3?
Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
All right, Chad, what is your number 3?
Separate Tables.
All right, and my number 3 is also Separate Tables. So Carly, what is your number 2?
Separate Tables.
Okay, Chad, what is your number 2?
The Defiant Ones.
All right, and my number 2 is Auntie Mame. Carly, what is your number 1?
The Defiant Ones.
Okay, Chad, what is your number 1?
Cat on Hot Tin Roof.
There you go. So with that, with our number 1s, Carly and I's, and Chad's number 2, the Defiant Ones will be defying the odds as our best picture.
I don't think you ever said what your number 1 was. Did you?
Did I not say it? Oh shit, I was last. Sorry, the Defiant Ones, because I wrote mine in already. Sorry guys, the Defiant Ones. It's the one I didn't say it.
Right.
Yeah, it was honestly tough. There was a point where I had Mame above Defiant Ones, but now talking about Defiant Ones, I switched that, and then there was one where I had Cat on the bottom over under Gigi, and I switched that. So the discussion actually made me change my ranking from where I first started. Either way, Defiant Ones would have won because it would have been 2-1-2, but now it's 1-1-2. So I think it's a good representative. It's the one we
Oh, yeah.
rewatched and felt it held up, and it has a lot of importance today. So very glad to
Yeah,
put
the Defiant Ones was close to being my number one. I don't know. I think it still is, but like Cat and Hot Tin Roof, I just really dug at the end, and I just watched it, so I went like, I think that I vibe with number one on that. But I'm so happy that Defiant
yeah.
Ones won. So
And it's fitting because Carly, this was your pick, and Sidney Poitier
yeah,
was the main reason for it. But
yeah,
also, I did not text you guys ahead of time because I wanted it to be a surprise. But now, having talked about these films, I was gonna say this slate is by far, I think, the weakest slate we've covered on the show since. Personally, I don't vibe with this slate, but I do think the Defiant Ones was a good surprise. Not a
you
surprise, I
say
had seen it before, but
you say
um,
ever?
of that we've covered like this one, when I did my averages, when I put all my averages in, this is my lowest ranked, like numerically, like I
Oh
actually put in
wow.
my scores. So I didn't want to say it ahead of time because I didn't want to skew everyone's perspective, but
Mhm.
yeah, that I'm not like passionately like anti this slate. It's very interesting. There was no like masterpiece of this slate, but I do think Defiant Ones is a pretty good winner of this slate, better than the one that actually won, if you will. So
Yeah.
now we have to get to the acting, Carly, and you did choose to go with actor first.
Yes.
Gee, I wonder who you're gonna pick.
I wonder.
Carly, go ahead. Tell us
Yes.
who your actor is gonna be winning their picture this
I'm
award here.
picking one of the best actors of all time, Sidney Poitier. He just melts into every role he does. Like I never look at him and I'm like, oh, that's Sidney Poitier. I'm just like, oh, that's the character he's playing. Like he's just amazing, and he brings such grace to all of his roles. And like, I mean, there's a reason he was the first Black man to win Best Actor. He's just next level, and I'm so excited to be able to pick him for this.
There you go. That's awesome. Chad, any thoughts on Sidney Poitier?
Yeah, I mean it's an easy choice because I mean he just like lights up the screen every time he's on it, and just his singing, just like everything he does in that movie is just incredible, and just has such great chemistry with Tony Curtis. So yeah, it was the obvious choice, and I'm so glad that Carly got it because it's her favorite. So
Yeah, there you go. I am next, and I actually am surprised I went this path, but I am very happy I did because I do think, despite it being a bad movie, I think Maurice Chevalier, is really doing a good job in Gigi. Despite the
mm,
character having his flaws, he is just such a welcoming presence. We made the joke about Lumiere, but he does feel like that inviting kind of narrator type. I always just love watching him when he was on screen. He was a far more compelling character for me, or presence to me, than Gaston and Gigi were in that film. So I really give him the credit because he made all the parts of Gigi that I couldn't stand somehow bearable, because he does have an energy. He has a way of talking. Just he embodies that French kind of flavor and flair. And I do think he's got a good singing voice. He's clearly a legend in movie musicals, and we didn't award him for the Love Parade, so I'm happy to give him his due here. I'm not passionate about a lot of these performances, but I think he did a very good job, a serviceable job. And Sidney Poitier would have been my pick, but I knew Carly was getting it, so I was ready to go with Maurice Chevalier, and I want to give him his due because I do think he is a very, very enchanting presence, despite the flaws with his character in the film. I think he is by far the standout of a bad, flawed film. So
nice. For me, this was really freaking tough because honestly, I think if you want to say anything about the slate, the acting I think is often very, very good. Not always, but in some of these, especially the three that I were my 1, 2, and 3, I thought had very great acting in it, like Separate Tables. Holy shit. Like I'll say some names before I say who I picked. Like Burt
okay.
Lancaster, David Niven, phenomenal. Because we're on actor. And then I could do Tony Curtis because he's incredible as well. And then if you go to Cat, you have Paul Newman. I'm not picking any of them. I was definitely going to go Paul Newman or Burt Lancaster. I was between those two. And then I finished Cat on Hot Tin Roof, and I said, I'm going to go Burl Ives.
Nice.
I'm going Burl Ives.
Okay.
I I've only known this guy really my whole life as the guy who sings "Have a Holly Jolly Christmas" and other Christmas songs.
Oh,
And
that's what you were joking about with Santa. I
yeah,
was not sure. Okay, now that you say it, I'm like, oh, that's the guy. Because I was like, I don't understand the Santa reference, and I don't want to seem dumb for asking. That
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Okay, I got you. I got you.
Yeah, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, Cat on a Tin Roof is a Christmas movie just because Burl Ives' voice is in it. Um,
Okay.
and
And when he does Rudolph, okay, yeah, okay, I know this guy.
yeah, I mean, if you rewatch it, you listen to Big Daddy talk, you'll be like hearing him sing like that voice that you've heard in like all these classic Christmas songs.
That's great.
And but at the very end there, when he has to kind of like think about his impending death and like just like the weight of that, and then just thinking about like all of the stuff that he's like rich, he's got like $10 million, which is a lot more back then than it is now. And then he looks at his basement full of treasures, and then he has his son telling him that like maybe he wasn't the best dad, he's valued money and treasures in his plantation more than he's valued being there for his children. And then he reflects on his father not being able to be as involved as he wanted, and me being a dad, thinking about that and like how involved I want to be in my son's life and stuff. So I just really connected with Burl Ives in this movie. And then the fact like when he started to tear up thinking about how much he actually loves his dad, just really like got me. And I was just like, that was like the only part in the whole entire slate that I almost cried at. So that's why it's my number one,
There
guys.
you go. I love it. No, it's great. It's great. I'm glad you got your number one too, because sometimes when you go third, it's like you took your favorite, you took your backup, but it's nice that you got like who you wanted, which is great.
Yeah.
I love that. Carly, any thoughts on Burl Ives or Maurice Chevalier before we move on to actress?
No, I'm surprised you didn't pick David Niven with how you were talking him up, though, Dale.
Yeah, I really loved him. He was my backup. Sidney Poitier was my one, Maurice Chevalier my two, Sidney would have been my third, or Niven would have been my third probably.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's a good slate for acting
good.
for sure. All right, Chad, you get to start us off for actress first. So who would you like for actress?
This one's also freaking tough, and obviously I can't name a bunch of names because that'd be,
You can do it after.
But there's so many people like in separate tables and really just separate tables that I was thinking about doing. But I think I'm gonna go Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, and I think I'm gonna do it and give it to Elizabeth Taylor.
She's in the Hall of Fame, y'all. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. I think she probably would have gotten in there anyways, even if I didn't pick her, but maybe not. I don't know what you guys would have picked. You can let me know. But yeah, I don't know. I just love her cadence. She's like a British actress who, just does the Southern accent. I think the draw really well, with her, like, how she carries it. And so like, she lengthens the way she talks. I just think it's like really good. I was like, wow, like that. Like I forgot she was British, as I watched this movie.
Yeah.
And, but I also like a lot of the relationship stuff and the stuff that she's got built deep down that's very relevant to today, where people are some people are like saying that childless cat ladies are just people who don't have children or somehow immoral now or whatever. And you have back then where you have a whole family who are kind of like chastising her for being a childless person. And it's like, well, some people can have kids, some people don't want to have kids, and that doesn't make them bad people either way. And with her, you can feel like this deep sense of like she kind of wants that, but she doesn't have it, or maybe she can't have it. And just like that whole like burden, but then also her wanting to be accepted in the family and reconnect with her husband. She was just doing a lot of work there. Plus there was like a whole thing I read where apparently she filmed part of the movie, and then she had a crisis in her own life, and then she came back and filmed other parts of it, and and when she came back, she like apparently looked a lot weaker or something.
So I have a little bit of a context of that. So her husband at the time, she's famously been married and divorced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in her life,
Good for
and
her.
she had eight marriages. The one marriage that didn't end in divorce was with Mike Todd, who she married in 1957, who died in 1958. So
Okay.
she was going through a divorce in 57, a remarriage, and then losing her husband in a private plane accident. So it was a very
That's right.
unexpected thing. So that is kind of why a lot of people tip their hat to her, because she just went through so much in her life. I mean, a lot of women at the time, we talked about Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli, especially as well,
Yeah.
like went through shit ton that, like, you know, a lot of dark demons of the time that these actresses overcame. So yeah, it makes it all the more impressive. I mean, we talked about Lion in Winter, Katharine Hepburn, Spencer Tracy died the same year. She came back, did Lion in Winter, and won an Oscar. So
Yeah.
it's really impressive when an actress can do this work, and I think it makes it better for it. Sadly, you know, but it does.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm very happy I got my number one pick because I kind of raved about her earlier. It's the reason why it was originally my number one until we talked about the Defiant Ones and I put it above it. But Auntie Mame was my original number one going into it because I was so obsessed with Rosalind Russell's performance. She's gonna be my pick. I just think her energy, every scene she's in, she could be saying the phone book, but if she's saying the phone book like Auntie Mame, darling, I'm gonna love it. And I think that's the thing, is like she can sell me anything. She can sell me that pen, as the guy from Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, would say. So Rosalind Russell is going to get my pick here. I was trying to look and see if like there's any other big movies that she's in that we could award her for. I did see she was in one of the movies we just covered recently, but I'll have to look it up. But yeah, she's great, and I love her, and I'm glad I get to pick her. So that's my pick. Yeah.
All right,
Carly?
you guys grabbed my number one, my number two. So
see, that's the tough thing about going third, you know.
Well, Sidney Poitier is worth it.
So we actually didn't cover Rosalind Russell on the show. I lied. So yeah, no, that's gonna probably be one of the only times. So I'm glad I repped her. Yeah.
So I'm picking Deborah. Is it Deborah? It's pronounced Deborah Carr.
Yep.
Kerr.
Kerr.
Deborah
You're right. You're Kerr. You're right.
It's Kerr.
Yep.
Okay.
It says on Wikipedia Carr, so I don't know. Deborah Carr. Maybe it's like a. Well, she's Scottish, right? She's Scottish, so Deborah Carr. I don't know.
Okay. Well, whatever her name is. I really liked her performance. I liked how it kind of started out like quieter, because that's who the character is. Like, she's shy. She kind of just listens to her mother. And I really like how you kind of see her grow a backbone and get to like eventually put her foot down. I think she portrayed that really well. And I think she was my favorite character in that movie. And I think Deborah Kerr maybe I think she did a great job with the performance.
Yeah, that's great. Chad, I know you like that movie a lot. What are your thoughts on Deborah Kerr? Anything to add?
No, really nothing to add, but there were so many great like actresses in there. Like I almost went Rita Hayworth.
Yeah,
just because.
It's funny. You almost went Rita Hayworth. You went Deborah Kerr. I almost went Wendy Hiller because I love her as well. So my backup for this Auntie Mame, it would have been Rosalind Russell, then Wendy Hiller, and then actually my backup to my backup in case I needed one, which I didn't. But it's funny, when you listed off the cast, Chad, the only person you didn't mention was May Hallett, who is Miss Meacham, who I think in very limited screen time makes a big impact. She always comes in and she's always making a fuss, and then she kind of leaves. And I just love her. I think she just has such a funny energy. She's such like a great character actor that like comes and goes very sporadically, but like feels like that comedic relief you need in that movie. So I'm glad I got to shout her out, even though I wouldn't have picked her. She's kind of like the Lee Fierro in Jaws, where I picked that and everyone was like, you picked Lee Fierro, she's in one scene. But like, she is kind of that actress in Separate Tables who comes in and just like lights a fuse and then leaves, you know. So I want to shout her out too.
But yeah, also that Jaws year just was not kind to actresses.
Yeah, it was Louise Fletcher, a bunch of actresses from Nashville, and then Lee Fierro. That was it.
Right. I just looked it up, and Deborah Kerr is Sybil, and I didn't realize that when Carly picked her. That's the correct choice.
Yes.
So freaking good in that movie.
Love it. So I also just pulled up my stats just to tell you, Chad. The lowest ranked I had in terms of averages before this was the 1930 year with All Quiet on the Western Front. But because of All Quiet, getting like a big score from me. My average for that was 5.2. My average for this was 4.4. So this is currently my lowest ranked slate just in terms of combining all the totals. So I just thought it's interesting. I'll keep a tab if anyone wants it, wants access to this doc, but I think it's just very interesting to look at. At the end we'll actually have to like look at all of them and decide what our top and bottom slates are. But not to say that this doesn't have some gems, and especially with the performances. Let me just recap real quick. For this year, I'll save picture for last. But our best actors, I have Maurice Chevalier for Gigi. Chad has Burl Ives for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and Carly picked Sidney Poitier in Defiant Ones, The Defiant Ones. For best actress, I picked Rosalind Russell for Auntie Mame. Chad picked Elizabeth Taylor for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, who now joins our Picture This Hall of Fame, and Deborah Carr from Carly picked Deborah Carr from Separate Tables. And our best picture based on averages is The Defiant Ones, and that is 1958. Regardless of how I feel about the slate, great discussions. Like, this was a really cool episode. A lot we disagreed on, but like a lot we also agreed on, and we got to kind of laugh a little. It's always fun when we all hate a film because it's like we can all kind of really laugh about it.
We had fun with it, at least.
It's always better. Like, I would have felt really bad if Carly was like, I love Gigi so much, and Chad and I are just like,
no, I'm a teacher. I can't. No.
But yeah, I really appreciate you being on here, Carly. I know, you started this as like a commenter years and years ago, and now you're like on draft day, you're on Marvelous Trivia, you're on this, like you're really, making a name for yourself here as one of the guests here. So we hope you had a fun time, as a fan to co-hosting the show here as a guest. How do you feel your first picture of this experience? How do you feel?
I thought it was great. One thing I didn't really think about before, like just watching 5 movies from the same year, it really gave me a sense of the year in a way, which I never considered before because I never watched the whole slate because it's rare that the whole slate's amazing. So I usually just listen to the episode and I'm like, okay, which of these sounds like a really great film?
You use the episode to make recommendations for yourself rather than watching them to, I got you.
But it was just really cool just getting a kind of snapshot at the year and like just being able to feel like what did 1958 feel like? That was something that I never thought about before because I never watched all the Best Picture nominees from a classic year, so this was tons of fun. I really loved it.
Yeah, we loved having you, and you did a great job, Carly. Yeah, any comments, Chad, on Carly's job? She get 5 stars?
Oh yeah. It's really cool because just like hanging out with Carly and forums and stuff a lot has been great. And then also hanging out with her in bigger panels and stuff is really, really great. But being able to have her here to discuss films in depth, I think was really cool because she has such great insights and she picked such an interesting, even though it's Dylan's lowest ranked slate, it's still an interesting one that 2.5 hours, we're really had a lot of great discussions
sinking our teeth with it.
So, and I think sometimes even if it's not some of the movies that you're gushing about, oh, I love that, if you're just having such great discussion, it's almost more interesting in a way.
Yeah, and I do always want to reiterate the panel is never the slate is never indicative of the guest. So Carly, this is not saying Carly was my least favorite guest. There's no least favorite guest. We're all equal. But I do think no, I'm the least favorite guest. I hate myself, and when I talk, I hate listening to myself talk. I should say I love myself. But I had to say it 3 times to believe it. But I do really appreciate you being on, Carly, and I do like when we pick slates that are a little bit less, even if they're great, sometimes lesser known. This is a lesser known slate, I would say. I think people know Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Gigi just because it won and because Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a famous play, but the rest of them, I don't see anyone talking about Auntie Mame or Separate Tables or even the Defiant Ones as much as some of other Sidney Poitier stuff. So I really like that we got to champion just a lesser known slate and that we had a guest to talk about it with. Because, as we saw with the Cats video, Carly, you bring the views too. So I hope people come and see you talk about them because you had such great things to say. And Chad, as always, it's always a pleasure doing it with you as well. You know how I feel about you. I love having you here to bounce off ideas with because, I couldn't do this alone. If I were to do this alone, this show would be a failure. So just a reiteration, even though we've been doing this 3 years, I hope you know how much I appreciate you, my friend Chad, and my friend Carly for all this. So cool. That's 1958. We still have to tease next month, which is a year, which is a big year. It is spooky season. And for spooky season, there's only one master of suspense, and there's only one year where he was nominated not once, but twice for Best Picture, and that is Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. Mr. Hitch. We are talking about the year 1940, which has 10 films. 10 films, some of them spooky, some of them not. One that has a scene taking place on All Hallows Eve. But that slate is All This and Heaven 2, a Betty Davis vehicle. Alfred Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent, The Grapes of Wrath. Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. Kitty Foyle, The Letter, The Long Voyage Home, Our Town, The Philadelphia Story, and Alfred Hitchcock's Best Picture winning Rebecca. So there we go. That is the slate. It's going to be held in October, which is my mom's birth month, and her name is Rebecca. So like, shout out mom. But also it's spooky season, which means we're going to be joined, as we are every spooky season. For 1999, we were for Sixth Sense. For 1991, we were for Silence of the Lambs, and we are yet again joined by Chad. Who we joined by?
My wife, Carrie Webb.
My wife. Yes.
My wife. It's also her birthday month. So.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to call it Carrie Foyle instead of Kitty Foyle. And there we go. We went from a cat on a hot tin roof to a Kitty Foyle. It's going to be a long voyage home to 1940. And that will be as part of our Year of Classics once again, showing that graphic because I'm very proud of it. But yeah, there you go. Our Year of Classics will continue, and then we will be rearing into the last 2 months of this Year of Classics before we have another whole themed year for next year. Chad and I have been discussing behind the scenes. We love the themes, so we're going to continue with it. But that is all for now. Carly, anywhere they can find you out there if they want to discover more of your work?
Well, in October, you can find me on Frame Rack for an episode I'm very excited for. It's a movie I know Chad does not like. So
yes,
that'll be
we're not going to say it now because this is probably going to be airing after Frame Rack. So or no, this is going to be airing before Frame Rack. So you will not know yet what that is, but you'll have to stay tuned to Frame Rack to find out what that film is going to be. But also directed by a Best Picture nominated director, M. Night Shyamalan. That's all we'll say. But we are also going to be doing several spooky season things here on the channel and on the TikTok. 31 Days of Halloween. Kelsey and I are doing our big Halloween wrap up as always, and we'll be watching spooky season. I'm also going to be covering New York Film Fest next month, so it's going to be a jam-packed month. Chad, what do you got going on next month on Welcome to Primetime? I know you're doing some stuff with spooky season, and then where else can they find you?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, here and other parts of the channel. But also, check out Cinema Chad, where I do rankings. You ranking with me. Dylan has been on there quite a few times, and we're always trying to bring out new stuff, but it's kind of halted a little bit. We like to do our research before we just jump into a ranking. So those will come out every once in a while. We just did our Wes Anderson and released it, and we have more in the works. But yeah, over at Welcome to Primetime, with my buddy Hunter Chambliss and my wife Carrie Webb, as mentioned earlier. We talk about horror. We talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a lot of really great horror things like that. But we just started doing our 61 Days of Primetime. We're basically going through the decades from the 1930s to the 2020s. And we're doing 6 movies each decade, 10 decades, 60 movies. And then we're ending with Halloween, 1978, where we're going to do on Halloween, we're going to do a live stream where we review it, talk about it. We're also going to throw in the bonus Hocus Pocus because Dylan, I always watch Hocus Pocus and Halloween at the end. It's the best thing to do. So just do that.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think that's it. We're a little over 2.5 hours. A great episode. But stay tuned next month, 1940 with Carrie. This was 1958 with Carly. From Chad, from Dill. Signing off. We'll see you next month. Thanks, guys.